The young man exhaled and then began to laugh, saying that this simply could not be. A certain girl said that she had kidnapped his prey, which was a mutant cockatrice, an A-rank monster. The guy's name was Lint and he was an adventurer. He had just been promoted to D rank, but he had already been defeated. The guy thought that defeating this monster was just a distant dream. Now they were traveling in search of a new job. The guy walked along a country road with a backpack on his back and said that he was strong enough, since Kurek was always so self-confident. Kuruk is a small furry monster that was in the pocket of Lint's chest apron. Kuruk was his friend who was originally a slime. If it weren't for his help, Lint would have been dead long ago. The guy was absolutely sure of it, and he may not look it, but Kuruk is a reliable partner. They stopped near the shore, from where a beautiful view of a large city opened up. Lint pointed at it with his hand and shouted that this was the city capital. And after they passed the gates of the capital, they found themselves in very busy streets. Lint smiled widely, realizing that this was his new beginning as an adventurer. There were a lot of different signs and shops on the streets. Apparently, this was one of the trading areas where the traffic of people is simply crazy. While some were selling their goods and communicating with people, offering the best price, others were delivering supplies to the merchants in the city on large horned animals harnessed to a cart. Walking further, Lint turned onto a quieter street and came across two girls who were dressed rather revealingly. One of them was standing with a pipe blowing smoke. When they saw Lint, they started to smile. It was obvious that they belonged to different races and were not human. The girls rushed to Lint, trying to hug him. The guy waved it off and walked on, blushing red. He looked down and asked Kuruk why he was looking at him like that. Now the guy needed to go to the guild first. Judging by the map he had in his hands, he was already there. Stopping in front of one of the buildings, Lint let out a long shout, saying that the guild building looked really cool. Lint noticed that the guild gate was very large and filled him with hope, as expected of the guild headquarters. Kukuru also began to flap his wings happily and rejoice. When the guy entered the guild, he immediately saw a bunch of different adventurers who filled the tavern on the first floor. They were sitting at their tables and talking loudly. At one of the tables sat two men who were the first to notice the new guest of the tavern. He of the men called Lint a bad word, and then called on his friend to turn around too. They saw that Lint had brought a monster with him. One of the men thought about it. Then he said that this could only mean one thing: the guy was a tamer. The further Lint walked forward, the more attention he began to attract. Adventurers turned around, saying that his pet monster was ugly. Someone also threw insults at the guy and told him that no one should come near him. Lint sighed sadly, thinking that he really was a tamer, that was his profession. In this world, such a profession had perhaps the worst reputation. One could say that the guy was on par with the janitor who was standing outside. Suddenly, someone stopped the young man. A huge man with a beard stood in front of Lint and said that tamers were not allowed in here. Then he sternly ordered the guy to leave. Lint raised his eyes and looked at the rude man. The young man said that he would not leave here because he had come to find work. Such situations, it must be noted, also happened often. The man chuckled and then pointed his finger at Lint. He said that if people like Lint were to go to the guild, their reputation would quickly begin to fall. Afterwards, the man threatened, saying that Lint had better leave before something happened. Lint did not respond to this. He simply walked on, apologizing to the man. He was taken aback, starting to get very angry. The adventurer was unhappy that his request was ignored. He raised his voice and said that Lint had asked for trouble himself, after which he swung his fist. List managed to see this, and then something happened that left many people very surprised. One of the men even spat out his drink from surprise. The huge adventurer was already lying on the floor, and on top of him was Kukuru, who was tormenting him. Lint calmly said that if the man wanted to start, he should be ready to answer for his words. This is what made the tamers hated and despised. They used their monsters to solve their own problems. Because of this, Lint's position was lower than the others. Lint snapped his fingers, calling his pet Kukuru back. The boy said that there was a lot more talk than action on the big guy's part. One of the men in the tavern raised his hand and shouted that enough of this spectacle had happened. He turned to Lint and said that the boy could stop. Lint turned around. The man with the scar over his eye said that Lint was a talented guy and the capital was always open to newcomers. Waving his hand, he said that Lint could just forget about this misunderstanding. Lint let go of his offender and went to the table to the bald adventurer. Having pushed back his chair, the guy asked for a beer. Having asked sarcastically if there was anything for the tamer, he caused a smile from his new comrade. The man raised his glass and made a toast to the future of the young tamer. Lint seconded him and said that he would drink to the health of his colleague. Afterwards, the man laughed and said that to tell the truth, there was nothing special there. At that time, Lint looked around and noticed something interesting. He saw a monster in a cage. He asked the man if it was a cockatrice by any chance. He replied that there was an adventurer of the same rank who had conquered him. There was quite a commotion. Lint asked how this monster had got here. The man noted that it was an A-rank monster. He also said that there was an adventurer of the same rank who was able to subdue cockatrice. There was quite a commotion. Lint immediately thought that it might be her. The guy raised both his hands and showed his cat ears, asking if this was what that A-rank adventurer looked like. The bald man was amazed that Lint knew this person. The man said that her name was Light Bylina and that she was quite famous in local circles. Lint talked with his colleague for a while longer, then left the guild building. Lint scratched his head, saying that the man kept telling him about Bylene. Lint had learned something from that and understood that the girl was an adventurer working alone. Lint began to remember the man's words. He had praised Bylina admiringly, saying that her movements were so fast that they were simply elusive to their eyes. That was why they called her Light. Lint thought that it would be better for him not to get involved with such high-ranking people as she. The guy understood perfectly well that he would not be able to bear such a burden. Now the guy intended to finish the quest he had taken and earn some money. After some time, Lint was already standing in front of the entrance to the sewer that the guild administrator had told him about. A draft of wind blew through him from within. Since it was very dark inside, Lint took out a torch and said that he had better finish here quickly and return. The guy started to walk forward and soon encountered his first enemy. It was either moles or opossums, which bared their teeth and rushed to attack. Lint's mission was to destroy the monsters that had gathered in the sewers. This was necessary so that larger monsters could not feast on them and settle there. Kuruk and Lint were doing great, but soon the boy realized that there was someone else in the sewers. He had a feeling that there was a high-level monster nearby. The guy thought that as soon as he finished his quest, he would definitely check it out. He wondered if he would have time. It was simply impossible to leave something like this unattended. Lint walked further along the corridors and soon saw the monster he sensed. It was the queen of the wolves, who was larger than the guy. She looked at the guy angrily and prepared for battle. Lint understood that this Branca monster was the highest among them. The guy did not understand how such a monster could end up here. Lint looked back and saw several people groaning in pain. Everyone was alive and the young man couldn't just leave them here. Lint decided that he had to protect them together with Kuruk. He had a magic dagger with him, Scroll. But this monster has a high level of defense, so it will be difficult to deal significant damage to him at once. However, it all boils down to the fact that a magic item must be used in such a situation. The Wolf Queen opened her mouth and rushed towards the young man. Lint shouted, pointing his hand towards the monster. He gave the order to his pet Kuruk to attack and protect his master. The little demon obediently responded and headed into battle. While the pet took the Wolf Queen's attack head-on, distracting the monster, Lint began to move behind her, launching his best attack. Lint shouted for Kuruk to step aside. Pointing his weapon at the monster, Lint summoned a fireball, which immediately began to fly towards the wolf. Afterwards, the guy used the speed use of items and all-round coverage. There was a big explosion and Lint started to celebrate happily. He made a direct hit and all wolves had a big vulnerability to fire. But this, apparently, was not enough to immediately defeat a monster of such rank. The light from the explosion dissipated and the Wolf Queen jumped straight at Lint. Lint was very scared, his eyes wide. He understood that this was the end of his life. But then something happened that the guy could not expect. Someone dealt a powerful blow to the she-wolf. The boy covered himself, avoiding small pieces of wall and dust getting into his eyes. Opening one, Lint heard a familiar voice. The girl said that she met the tamer again on her way. Lint was kneeling before the adventurer who had conquered the Wolf Queen. The boy said the adventurer's name, Bylina Svetlia. The girl said that the tamer had apparently already found out who she was. The girl held out one of the trophies that could be obtained from this monster. Lint took it in his hands and said that this item was quite expensive. Bylina waved her hand, saying that the guy's name was supposedly Lint. She also added that this thing would serve as proof that the guy had found this monster and was able to stand up to it. Lint started to get a little nervous, saying that it was Bylina who had defeated the wolf. The guy couldn't accept something so expensive. Bylina laughed, saying that everything was fine and it was just a souvenir. Little Kuruk began to rejoice, attracting the attention of the girl. Bylina bent down and stroked the pet, saying that he too was very good in battle. The girl continued to pet the pet, being at the level of Lint's waist. Because of this, the guy was able to see something interesting for himself. The girl called out to Lint, realizing that he was not answering her. Bylina took hold of her chest armor, saying that now she understood what was going on. The girl called Lint slightly obsessed with female beauty. Lint shouted indignantly, saying that his reaction was caused by someone else. The guy tried to justify himself by saying that he had never spoken to an A-rank adventurer before. Bylina smiled, saying that Lint was quite a nice boy. Afterwards, she said that they could talk about what Lint had originally thought of. Lint became even more nervous, saying that he did not understand Bylina at all. The girl leaned towards Lint and pressed her finger into his chest, urging the guy to speak more freely. Afterwards, she quickly went behind him and hugged him from behind. Lint grinned, saying that he urgently needed to inform the guild about the completion of the task. Bylina said that she would go with him. Now Lint couldn't say for sure if everything would be okay. They headed back to the city and soon arrived at the guild headquarters. After they had completed the task, Bylina insisted that Lint follow her. They arrived at one of the places where the man respectfully greeted Mrs. Bylina. Lint noticed that they had just arrived and were let in first. The girl said that there would be a celebration today and she would buy the entire menu here. Lint understood that the establishment looked expensive. After some time, the waiters began to bring food and fill the table with a variety of dishes and appetizers of meat and fresh vegetables. Lint kept thinking that everything looked very rich. The guy couldn't believe that he could actually eat it. Bylina smiled and wished him a pleasant appetite, urging him to try everything that Lint wanted. Lint picked up a fork and tried one of the dishes. Tears of happiness immediately began to appear in the guy's eyes. He said that the food here was very tasty. The local food was truly amazing and made him cry. Bylina continued to laugh, watching all this. The girl said that it was the first time she saw someone crying while eating. Then she screamed that it was time to start eating for real and Lint pounced on the dishes. While Lint was greedily trying everything that was on the table, Bylina started a dialogue. The girl said that being a tamer is very unusual. She asked Lint if he knew about it. The guy raised his head in surprise, simultaneously stuffing spaghetti into his mouth. Lint said that he didn't see anything special in it. Then the guy added that now he was only a D rank. Bylina stroked the little pet, saying that when they first met, her intuition told her something. The girl felt that Kiryuk was the same as her. Bylina remembered Lint's words about what the guy had told her about the slime earlier. Even monsters that have evolved cannot radically change their appearance. She didn't know if this was true. Lint said that he had never tamed other monsters before, so he couldn't tell Bylina for sure either. Bylina jumped up from her seat, shouting loudly that she had a proposal in that case. The girl added that it was, of course, beneficial for both of them. Lint didn't quite understand what was going on. He silently looked at the adventurer. Bylina leaned even closer and pointed her finger at herself, asking him to tame her herself. After she said this, Lint's chair began to tip backwards and the boy fell. The girl jumped to her feet, worriedly pronouncing the boy's name. Bylina laughed, asking if the guy was okay. Lint began to rise to his feet, saying that he was simply very surprised by such a request. Lint began to pick up the food, which also fell on the floor, and said that the girl, apparently, did not even know what it was like to tame someone of her level. Lint began to try to explain to her, but the girl got ahead of him. Bylina approached the guy and took him by the chin, carefully saying that they needed to sign a contract. Lint said worriedly that taming didn't work on humans and the like. Bylina started licking his face, saying that Lint had probably never tried it to say for sure. Lint remained in his place, continuing to figure out why Bylina needed this. He did not understand why the girl wanted to be tamed. Bylina continued to lick his face, saying that it would be much more fun for her. Lint leaned away from her. The guy said that the girl would lose her freedom in that case. A smile began to appear on Bylina's face. The girl began to lower her hand down, saying that she would not mind if Lint played with her from time to time. Lint became embarrassed. He began to turn away from Bylina, wondering what would happen if he did it. Bylina hugged the guy, saying that if he wanted to tame her himself, he could repay in a similar way. After they finished dinner, the couple went upstairs accompanied by a clerk. The man opened the door to their room, and Bylina immediately pushed the guy onto the bed. The girl continued to lick Lint, which greatly embarrassed him. Seeing this, Bylina grinned, saying that the guy was reacting very nicely. Afterwards, she suggested that he had never had a girlfriend before. Bylina said that she had many secret techniques. Now she wanted to check whether Lint could withstand them all and whether the guy had enough endurance. Bylina continued to press the guy, saying that now he must tame her right here, because Bylina simply would not be able to endure it any longer. Lint understood that this did not look like a taming process. Bylina looked at the guy slowly taking off her armor. The girl asked what Lint would do now and what decision he would make. Lint couldn't stand it and shouted that he agreed and would do it. Bylina smiled contentedly, closing her eyes in anticipation. She hugged Lint and the guy said that they could begin the taming process. This made Bylina laugh, and the girl said that Lint was a very honest guy. The unique ability of the tamer is to establish a master-servant relationship with the demonic beast. Bylina herself thought that while using the ability, images would flash through her head. She was very keen to know what was going on in Lint's mind. The very basis of acceptance is to give and take. They joined hands and Lint said he wasn't sure it would work out. Lint said that it had been only a short time since he had tamed Kyryuk. The girl began to laugh, saying that Lint seemed to be an inexperienced boy. This confused the young man. He told Balina to stop making fun of him and then firmly assured her that they could begin. Balina calmly replied that she was ready. They began to slowly lower their heads to their hands. Lint was reading the spell that is recited during the taming ritual. He said that he wanted to receive protection and help from the girl. In return, he would have to give something. At this point, they were with their eyes closed, and an exciting moment had come for the girl. Lint finally said that he would give himself in return. Balina said that these were rather big words for someone who had never had relationships with girls before. The guy sheepishly said that he really had little he could give her. It is for this reason that he gives himself to her in order for the ritual to take place. Lint also said that he knows somewhere deep inside himself that this is exactly what Balina wanted. Balina squeezed his hand and began to be amazed with delight. She understood all this as if the tamer could also become tamed. Lint explained that he meant possible conditions. The girl immediately agreed and leaned on the guy. Lint put his hand on her shoulder and asked if she agreed with such conditions. Balina said that she was happy with this path. Lint really didn't know what would happen next and how everything would develop. The guy said that in that case, if Balina agreed, he would sign a contract. The girl said that she felt several times stronger. Lint looked at her and smiled, adding that he also felt her strong aura. Balina thought that it was because of taming. Lint said that his male pride began to fall since Balina was much stronger than him. The girl only answered that the young man needed to train. Lint said he knows of several ways to tame a beast, but he doubts it will produce enough power. The tamer only needs trust. Balina said that it could even work on a dragon. After all, the guy was able to tame a rank adventurer. She smiled and said that maybe Lint really could become a dragon tamer. Lint was surprised. He couldn't believe that such things didn't exist yet. The guy said that there were dragon knights as far as he understood. Balina compared dragons to domestic animals and said that they were within the power of their tamers. The girl also said that Lint is an unusual tamer because he was able to tame her. This only proves how good the guy is in this matter if he dealt with an S-rank adventurer. Balina added that the power she had spoken of earlier would be in full effect. Lint said that he had simply thought the girl was crazy. Balina said that she would show him something now. She moved her hair aside and Lint saw horns there. The girl smiled and said that the horned beast was 3 times more powerful. The next day came. The boy went to the guild of the kingdom's capital. The sun was already high in the sky and the streets were filled with noisy crowds of people. The adventurers took turns going into several reception windows and taking tasks from the guild workers. Finally, it was Lint's turn and he stood up at the counter. The guy's head immediately fell on the tabletop. The girl was a little scared, staring at the young man. Tired Lint, who had not been allowed to sleep all night by Balina, extended his hand and said that he wanted to register a group of 2 people. The girl, a little embarrassed, told the guy that she recognized him. It was Lint the tamer who had registered yesterday. The worker noticed that the guy looked rather tired. Lint confirmed this. Soon Balina appeared from behind him, who sarcastically noted that the guy should observe a sleep schedule. Afterwards, she assured that Lint was still young, so there was nothing to worry about. When the girl saw Balina, she was even more surprised. She immediately thanked Balina for her work and stated that the adventurer had been nominated for promotion to S rank and handed her the supporting documents. The worker leaned a little closer and whispered to Balina that Lint was a D rank. She doubted that it would be okay for Balina to have such a companion. A familiar voice of a man was heard nearby. It was the same bald adventurer who had met Lint in the tavern. He exclaimed when he saw that the guy was still alive. Lint smiled at him and said that he had managed to cope with the task. The guy thanked his colleague for helping him yesterday. The man asked if Lint would really be in a group with Miss Balina. Then he remarked that Lint was damn good. Lint smiled and said that a lot had happened recently. Balina added that Lint really was a great guy. The man glanced sideways at the people behind him and said that he heard how Lint saved those weirdos in the sewers. The 2 guys immediately jumped up from their desk when they saw their savior. They happily rushed towards him, saying words of gratitude. The guys also noted that Lint had done a great job yesterday. The boys thought that the tamer was able to defeat the Wolf Queen on his own. Lint began waving his arms, trying to explain. The guild worker noticed that the young man had noticeably risen in the eyes of other people. They took the quest and Lint said that now that he was paired with Balina, they could only take C-rank quests, with their S and D ranks being combined. Balina told Lint not to worry about it. The girl added that they would increase the group's rank to S rank. Lint asked in surprise if he could really get S rank. Balina started laughing, saying that of course they would. The girl said that they would become stronger and as cute as Lint and his pet Kyryuk. Balina said that together they could become the best team in history, and she was completely sure of it. The girl's face really looked happy and satisfied. Suddenly, Kiryuk began to move in the pocket of his apron and make sounds. When Lint noticed him, he immediately asked what had happened. Kiryuk pointed somewhere to the side with his paw. When Lint began to raise his eyes, he saw a sword being dragged along the floor, and it was carried by the very man from the guild with whom they had had a quarrel. He walked up to Lint and started laughing, saying that he had been looking for the guy for a long time. His smile seemed completely crazy. The man shouted that Lint was just a shorty with a monster. Afterwards, he said a phrase about how the one who laughs last is the one who laughs the most. The man promised to kill Lint. Balina looked at the guy and winked at him, after which she raised her hand up. The man threw back his sword and rushed to attack Lint. Balina rushed to meet him. The girl screamed that the tamer shared his power with her. Focusing her gaze, Balina struck the evil adventurer and a flash of light formed around him. The armor and clothes immediately began to fly apart into small pieces. With each passing moment, the flash grew larger and stronger. The blow threw the adventurer far back and he crashed his body into a nearby column, breaking it. Lint realized that the girl from his team had put too much effort into protecting herself. He shouted Balina's name and then angrily asked what she had done. Balina herself was in shock. She also addressed Lint by name and then turned around and said that she thought she had created a wave with her blow. Afterwards, the adventurer threw herself into Lint's arms and shouted that it was simply wonderful. She had tried many times before, but she had never succeeded. Today, she was able to do it effortlessly. Balina was happy and could not describe how incredible she was. Then she suddenly jumped to her feet, freeing Lint. The girl bent her legs and squatted down. Lint looked at Balina warming up and asked the girl if she wanted to go somewhere before they set out on the quest. Balina said there was one place on the outskirts. When Lint asked where exactly it was, Balina just smiled. The girl told the guy to just follow her. Lint thought that she wanted to hold hands. The girl started laughing, telling the tamer that he was still embarrassed by her. This was very strange, considering what had happened between them quite recently. Lint hesitantly extended his hand to her and she took it. Balina repeated so that the guy would believe her and just follow. Lint thought that he wanted to hold Balina's hand and see her happy face. Balina said that they were heading forward. After she turned, she accelerated very sharply, pulling Lint along with her. The guy did not expect such a turn and screamed. They rushed at great speed, knocking down the merchants who were walking along the city street. After them, there was only dust, and they moved so fast that they even overtook the carts. Soon there was a big explosion. Balina suddenly began to break, after which she said that they had finally arrived. Lint thanked God that he had survived. Balina looked ahead and said that there was a dragon's nest ahead. Lint was very surprised, at first not believing the girl. Balina explained that here they could find cubs to tame. Balina said that now the guy will become a dragon tamer. Lint was shocked by such a statement. The guy thought that this was increasingly similar to a search for death. Balina looked around, looking for the strongest cub. Lint was very surprised that there were other dragons here very close. Afterwards, he thought again about the fact that he could not see, but he could hear perfectly well that the dragon's breath could be heard ahead. At this time, Balina looked at one of the dragons, wondering if he was a good boy. Lint cried out sharply that something was happening underground. Balina replied that it was all just in time. The dragon appeared like a moth drawn to the light. The ground cover began to crumble. Lint screamed in panic that Balina seemed to want to laugh at him. A few moments later, a dragon appeared before them. It was terribly huge. Lint covered himself with his hand, continuing to try to see it. Around him, the ground continued to crumble and explode. Balina did not wait for the dragon to attack first, so she decided to act immediately. The girl shouted the spell Fire Bullet and rushed forward. After that, she was able to knock down the large dragon with a punch, just like she did with that adventurer earlier. The monster's head hit the ground with a loud thud, and Balina continued to dominate the fight. Balina smiled and asked the dragon if he still wanted to fight. She raised her left hand and made a gesture that called the monster to take action. The dragon began to rise to its feet, after which it began to shake its head from side to side, showing that it no longer intended to resist. Balina was glad of this decision. The girl turned to Lint and began waving her hand at him, beckoning the boy. Balina, with a smile on her face, shouted for Lint to begin his attempts to tame the animal. Lint lowered his backpack and asked Balina what she meant. He had no idea that such huge creatures as this dragon could be tamed. Balina patted the dragon on the head and said that this individual was a good boy. She tried to show with her whole appearance that the dragon was very obedient and harmless. Lint became embarrassed, saying that in his opinion, the dragon was simply very afraid of Balina herself. The girl immediately became indignant and politely asked the guy to repeat what he had just said. Finally, Lint approached the dragon, who bowed his head to the tamer. The guy put his hand on his head and began the taming process. A bright light began to appear near his hand. Lint thought that at first glance it didn't seem that way to him at all, but the dragon turned out to be quite cute. The guy began to think about the fact that Balina had beaten him unfairly and the dragon was now afraid. Lint finished taming. The boy smiled and told the dragon that everything would be fine with him now. Lint said that he could guarantee his safety. Balina pulled herself up, asking if everything had worked out. Lint confirmed it. The girl said that this was what she expected from the incredible Lint, and now he is a dragon tamer. Lint said that Balina had done the lion's share of their joint work. The guy added that it was she who had made the dragon obey. The girl smiled in response, saying that Lint was rather modest. Balina also noted that she was also under his power, just like Kuryuk and now the dragon. The girl said that this was surprising, because he could tame creatures that were much stronger than him. Lint asked Balina a little doubtfully about what power of his she meant. The girl joyfully exclaimed that she meant the power of the tamer that the young man possessed. Balina said that their team consists of his tamed friends. She also noted that the most important thing in it is Lint, and that is precisely his strength. Lint became embarrassed, saying that he did not fully understand what Balina was talking about, so he intended to simply agree with her. To himself, the guy thought that it would be better for everyone. Balina smiled broadly again, saying that Lint did not see his own improbability at all. She joyfully announced the young man as Lint the Dragon Tamer. Balina stroked the dragon and said that it was high time to give him some name. Lint thought about it, because he wanted to choose something that the dragon himself would like. After a couple of seconds, the young man exclaimed contentedly, raising his index finger. He had a great idea and he would like to name the dragon Gill. Lint turned to the dragon and pointed his finger at him. The young man solemnly declared that the dragon Gill was now his warrior, and from that day on he was obliged to serve. The dragon also began to rejoice at this event. When Balina saw this, she immediately began to laugh, saying that the dragon was truly happy now. Lint also remarked that it was wonderful. Balina thought that they could take the dragon on a raid. Afterwards, she suggested that they start moving out. Lint said that he agreed, but he didn't know their direction yet. Balina extended her hand and said that Lint just kept following her. She pulled him up and they found themselves riding the dragon. Lint was surprised that they suddenly had a saddle. Balina turned her head and said that she had a magic bag for adventurers on her belt. The girl said that you can put a lot of things in it. Lint suggested that such a thing could cost as much as a whole house. Balina threw the bag to the guy, saying that she was giving it away and now Lint could use it instead of his backpack. Lint was immediately confused and did not understand whether he could really use her. Balina confirmed everything once again, saying that this was how the girl wanted to express her gratitude. Then she lifted the reins and the dragon gradually began to take off. They were ready to go into their first battle together with Gil. The dragon's huge wings began to raise dust beneath them. Afterwards, Lint thought that they were going to tame another beast. Balina said that Lint understood everything correctly. The girl said that their next target was a demonic beast. Balina began to urge the dragon to move faster, telling Gil that they would be able to track the new target from above. Gil sped up and Lint and Kuruk grabbed on tighter to keep from flying off. So Lint's group flew over the canyon. They moved at a measured pace looking for the demonic beast. Lint pointed his hand sharply to one side, trying to get Balina and Gil's attention. It seemed they were on to something. Balina immediately focused and prepared to act. The girl began to get to her feet, leaving the saddle. Balina said that she had not thought to meet the monster so close. Then she jumped down from the dragon, rushing to the ground. Lint was initially afraid for the girl, but then realized that she probably knew what she was doing. The tamer turned to his dragon, which he ordered to follow the adventurer. Balina resolutely continued to pursue her goal. The girl screamed that she would not let the beast escape from her. Lint tried to call Balina, urging her to stop. When Balina was only a few steps away from the monster, she jumped on it, deliberately shouting that she had caught the beast. She grabbed it with her arms and stopped it. Lint was already running to Balina, asking her along the way if everything was okay. Balina turned to the guy and told him to get ready for taming right away. She knew perfectly well that they had to do this as quickly as possible. When Lint was about to run up to them, the beast's body triggered a large explosion of magical energy. This flash immediately threw the guys aside. Balina was not going to give up and immediately rose to her feet, continuing to run towards the demon. A second flash began to flicker in the distance. The beast began to attack its pursuers. Balina was able to easily dodge the fireball that was launched at her. Lint was still kneeling. The guy was very worried about Balina, who could get hurt. The girl just laughed, saying that the beast's attacks were not strong enough to harm her. Suddenly, the beast itself appeared before them. Balina opened her eyes wide, finally seeing what kind of demon appeared before them. It was the fire wolf, the emperor. Lint immediately shouted that the demon had a very strong aura. Balina agreed, saying that this monster belonged to the S rank. Balina also added that its capabilities were amazing. Lint now understood that the aura of this rank made it clear that the monster's powers were simply immeasurable and completely unknown. Balina told Lint to begin. Balina wanted the tamer to distract the wolf for about 3 minutes. Lint thought about it, because this idea seemed crazy to him, so they were able to identify the type of monster. 3 minutes was quite a long time. All this hinted that the guy would have to fight one of the strongest monsters in this world, having such a big difference in ranks. Lint doubted whether he would be able to put up any resistance at all. Then the guy interrupted himself, saying that now was not the time to hesitate. Lint knew very well that he still had Kuryuk and Gil, who would certainly be able to help. The guy knew very well that this was his chance to ascend to S rank together with his friends. Lint asked Balina if 1 minute would be enough for her. Balina smiled and said that they were ready to begin. Balina encouraged the guy, saying that time was of the essence now and she was counting on the guy. Lint, in high spirits, replied that he would not let her down. Balina used the skill Spirit. This skill was able to accumulate magical and energy particles. Complex, but useful for obtaining explosive power. Now Lint understood why the girl needed so much time. Balina couldn't fight without them now. The team needed to hold off the fire wolf. Lint sent Kuryuk ahead. He then turned to Gil and shouted for the dragon to use his fire breath and set the monster on fire. The dragon obediently opened his mouth and splashed his breath at the wolf. But it was obvious that the fire would hardly be able to harm the fire wolf itself, because it was of the same element. The demon broke through the dragon's stream and jumped on Lint, opening his mouth. At the very last moment, Kuryuk was able to save his master by repelling the demon's attack. Kuryuk flew into the wolf, knocking down its flight path. When Lint opened his eyes and saw this, he happily praised his little demon. The young man said that it was simply incredible. It was much more than one would expect from an ordinary slime. The wolf froze in place, looking for a new moment to attack. Lint turned to Balina, realizing that the monster was now aimed at Balina, who continued to use her skill. The wolf rushed at her, leaving behind a fiery flash. Lint shouted the girl's name and then his dragon. Gil rushed to protect Balina, standing in front of her like a wall. The living shield worked perfectly, but Lint knew very well that it was hard for the dragon to hold back such an onslaught from the demon. Lint shouted again to Kuryuk to help his friend with force. Kuryuk rushed forward, but the wolf created a fiery explosion around himself, which immediately pushed all opponents aside. It was clear that the demon was starting to get angrier. Suddenly, a powerful explosion was heard. Kuryuk was already flying to the side, amazed at such a great force. Lint himself also jumped to the side, dodging the blast wave. Lint was knocked down but continued to command his beasts. The boy pointed his hand at the dragon, urging Gil to attack with all the strength he had. The dragon opened its mouth and began to attack with a fiery breath, directing it at the demon. The wolf's body was consumed by fire. Lint slowly began to rise to his feet, realizing that Gil had managed to land a direct hit with his breath. It was truly an incredible sight, but it was far from over. The strength was already running out and the guys gave it their all. At that moment, Balina was already ready and Lint saw how the girl raised the fire wolf above her. Balina smiled and apologized to Lint for making the guy wait. Lint, out of breath, shouted the girl's name, to which she only responded that it was time to tame the beast. While Balina held the demon, Lint ran up to it and began using his taming skill. The wolf bowed down, closing its eyes. Afterwards, Lint wiped his forehead from sweat and said that they finally did it. The guy said that the wolf is calm now. It's amazing that Balina defeated the S-rank monster in a second. Balina smiled and said that Lint had just gone through his first battle with his warriors. She praised the boy, saying that he had tried his best. Lint said that he had been desperate all this time, so he saw no other options. He also said that Gil and Kuryuk did most of the work. Balina noted that the boy also fought as a tamer. Lint said that the girl was right. Then he suddenly grabbed his shoulder, which began to hurt badly. The young man said that he was hit during the fight and now he feels as if his bones are broken. Balina dug around in her pockets a bit and pulled out a small dark bottle. She said that Lint could drink it. She handed him the healing potion. Lint immediately thanked the girl, but then saw that this item was of a special class. He was very surprised by this because such things are very expensive. Lint opened the bottle and gave some of the potion to his pet Kuryuk. Lin also praised him, saying that the slime was simply wonderful in battle and had saved his tamer's life on multiple occasions. Balina pointed her finger at the dragon Gil and told Lint not to forget about his new friend either. Lint said that the girl was certainly right. Lint knew right away that he would name the wolf Kajero. Balina exclaimed approvingly, saying that it was indeed a fine name. Lint explained that it suited the battle that had just taken place. Balina leaned over to the wolf emperor and began to stroke him. The girl said that the demon, apparently, really liked his new name. Lint stroked the beast, then said that from now on he asked the demon to lend his strength to their team. The wolf happily narrowed his eyes, letting out a confirming howl. Balina explained that this choice of demon was not at all random. She was just about to tell Lint the reason why she chose Kajero. Initially, the guy answered that the demon was very strong. Balina confirmed this guess, adding that here we are also talking about Lint himself and his internal characteristics. Balina said that there is something that in the world is called spirit possession. She wondered how much Lint himself knew about it and what he knew at all. It was late night and Lint's group needed to recuperate after such a productive and hard day. The dragon itself lurked in the forest while Lint and Balina were in the capital. The guy began to open his eyes in the middle of the night, saying that they were here again. Balina slept peacefully, making a light snore. Lint smiled, quietly saying that the girl was very tired today. But it was not surprising because she had fought so much. Lint thought that if he could master Kajero's powers, then he would certainly be able to help her in battle. The young man began to recall yesterday's conversation. Then she asked the guy about spirit possession. Balina also said that it would not be superfluous because all high-ranking tamers fight exactly like that. Lint suggested that if he could master this technique, then he would be able to fight alongside Balina herself. The girl said that this was indeed the case, but it was better not to talk about it. Balina called Kajero to her. The wolf obediently approached and the girl leaned towards him. Lint did not understand at that moment what Balina wanted to do. The girl just smiled, and at that moment a stream of fiery energy from the wolf gushed towards Lint. The guy was engulfed in flames. The guy stroked the wolf, finally understanding what Balina meant. While Lint's entire body was burning, Balina said that the young man could try to use his new power. She suggested that he run a little forward. Lint said that he would do as Balina asked him. The boy got ready and began to accelerate. The fire pushed him forward strongly, which the young man did not expect at all. Only the stone wall that was located ahead was able to stop the tamer. He hit it and slowly began to slide down. Balina laughed, saying that Lint probably still needed to learn to control this power. Lint, however, could not even think that this was in the order of things. Balina tried to explain as simply as possible and said that Lint was now as strong as Kajero. Lint did not understand why she suggested that he train with him. Balina said that it would be better to get used to his strength, because from tomorrow they would train a lot. Lint cried, realizing that she was not joking. He continued to lie in bed and reasoned that it was true that you couldn't argue with Balina. If he could control Kajero, his rank would immediately rise, and it would be possible to create the team that the girl wanted. Besides, the guy will be able to fight side by side with Balina herself and everyone else. It will be an S-rank team, but what should they be like in Balina's eyes and what is Lint's role in it? From these thoughts, Balina began to slowly open her eyes. Apparently, she heard Lint's quiet voice. The girl rubbed her eyes and asked if she really fell asleep. She immediately apologized to Lint, but the young man objected, saying that she must be very tired from the battles. But Balina said that it was not the battles that had exhausted her so much. The girl took a jug of water and began to pour it over herself. She also said that she was tired because of their end of the day, because Lint had done a great job with her at night. Balina suddenly threw her leg up, saying that they had made a lot of progress today. Lint agreed because a lot had really happened today. Balina began bending her fingers, quietly pronouncing the names of their team members, and soon said that in her opinion, they had already completed their composition. The girl told about how she sees the team's plan of action. Kiryuk will be in the vanguard because he has excellent defensive abilities. Then comes the main force, which is Lint himself, Balina and Kajero. An archer or a mage would be ideal for the rear. Lint thought that Gil would get this role. Balina said that everything was correct and Balina would be able to help him if necessary. Afterwards, she said that they also needed a good healer for the team now. She pointed her finger at the young man, saying that Lint could also be suitable for this role. Lint thought about it, saying that almost every team has a healer. The guy didn't know for sure whether they would be able to find him or not. Balina said that this task was quite within their capabilities. The girl explained that she already had some information on this matter. Lint was very surprised because he had not even heard about all this before. Balina said that the saint was due to visit the capital soon, so it was a great opportunity to recruit her into the team. Lint thought that Balina had gone completely crazy. The girl hit the water with her hands, saying that she was serious when she said all this. Balina intended to tell everything about their situation. Lint covered his ears and began to shout that he refused to listen any further. Balina pressed the boy with her hands and began to ask about what had frightened him so much. Balina urged the young man to calm down. Lint continued to resist. Lint knew very well that the one called Enlightened by the Gods was the strongest magician in the world. The Holy of Holies was the highest magical rank that could be earned. Lint had already begun to imagine his posters hanging all over the city and the townspeople looking at them. The young man said that he would become the main enemy of humanity if he allowed himself such impudence. Balina smiled and said that it would be great. Lint urged her to think about her words before and also asked the girl not to joke like that anymore. Lint understood perfectly well that the saint was definitely not his level to tame the magician like his dog. Balina said that the girl herself was very beautiful, and Lint thought about it. Afterwards, they went to bed, and the next day Balina was already walking towards the rest of the group, completely satisfied. The girl was holding several sheets of paper with the guild's instructions in her hands. She said she had picked out some great options for today's training. Lint looked at them and said they were too much for them. Balina countered, saying they could handle it. Balina also added that if they make a mistake, they can immediately run away. She also said that those who do not take risks never get the best for themselves. Besides, Balina really thought that this would be a great workout for the guy. Lint noticed that Balina was acting very energetic today. Balina asked where Kajero was now. The guy answered that the wolf was in the spirit realm. Balina smiled and said that it was a practical solution. She also added that he could come and go completely unnoticed. In this, she was very different from Gil. Lint thought that this was another reason why Balina chose the wolf. The girl explained that if Lint could control his kind, he would become a real magician. Balina also noted that Lint is already quite good at this, and even she is not so strong in such things. Lint read that the first quest is to destroy monsters and collect explosive herbal fruits. Balina assured that such a task would be easy for them. They arrived at the green location, and Balina said that most of today's quests would take place here. She said that now they are on the meadow, which will never grow back. They got off the dragon and Balina thanked the beast for the work done. Lint continued to familiarize himself with the quest, seeing that its difficulty was recommended only from rank B. The name seemed rather strange to the young man. Balina laughed and said that maybe they called it badly, but she was absolutely sure that there were monsters here. Lint knew perfectly well that he had absolutely no reason not to believe Balina. A huge beetle jumped out of the ground at them, but Balina did not lose her vigilance. The girl didn't even turn towards the threat and fought off the attack by raising her hand. She said that most of the inhabitants here are just bugs. That's how Lint's training began. The guy stood in front of the location and immediately called Kajero, who shared his power with the owner. Of course, they finished all the quests they took. Lint tried again and again, but he still found it difficult to cope with the power of his S-rank pet. As soon as he tried to do anything, he was immediately thrown aside. As expected, it wasn't easy at all. But Lint managed to learn something really important while he was trying to interact with the wolf. If he uses Kajero, it doesn't matter who it is, the worm master or the dwarf deathworm. He could kill them with his wolf's fire that covered him like a protective aura. Balina made a remark to the guy, saying that if he continued to deal with monsters in this way, then they would not be able to collect any materials that dropped from them. After some time, Balina decided that the guy should take a break. They settled down near a huge oak tree and made a fire. Now it was time to have a good snack to gain strength. Lint cooked a dish in a frying pan and put it on plates. Then he handed one of them to Balina, saying that he was able to cook food from the killed monsters. Balina was amazed as soon as she saw the appearance of the dish. She tried a little and said that it was very tasty. The girl exclaimed that Lin was an excellent cook. She joked again that the guy could open his own restaurant in the capital. Lint explained that he learned to cook when he lived alone for a long time. Balina said that she would not have thought that potions could be used in cooking. The girl liked raw meat and its taste most of all. Lint was a little surprised by this fact. Lint thought about it. He understood that Balina was a beastman, so she could easily have eaten something like that. The girl called him, saying that by hunting for explosive fruits, the guy began to use Kajero's abilities better. Explosive fruits were plant-type monsters with humanoid faces that emerged from the ground and exploded on impact. Plus, they were delicious. Lint said it was a bit tough for him at first. When they exploded, he sent out a shield and protective images to Kajero. They were all safe only because Kajero had time to react. Balina smiled and said that Lint had grown noticeably. Then she stepped on the fire and put it out. It was time for them to return home to the capital. Balina leaned forward, asking if they had any quests left. Lint said he would check everything now and added a minute later that they had one, the most dangerous one, left. Balina urged him to go and finish their mission. The training would soon be over. Lint had the feeling that he had been able to synchronize with Kajeru very well during this time. Now Lintu had one last thing left, and that was inventing and sending images to Kajeru. Now they could use all of this as a serious weapon. The last mission was to exterminate monsters that were hybrids of several animals. Beaver-like cats with a horn on their head, they rushed to attack the guy. As soon as they approached him, Lint jumped up, dodging the attack. After the guy extended his hand towards the monsters and Kageru began to incinerate them. These were the last ones. Lint exhaled and said that according to his calculations, he should have already managed. The guy checked with Balina and the girl said that Lint had done a great job. Balina jumped to the guy and happily said that now Lint can finally control Kagero's body. She saw everything and considered this spectacle simply incredible. Lint smiled back and extended his fist to the girl. He declared that he could now fight on par with her. Balina replied that she was really looking forward to this moment. After they went a hand in their quest, they immediately attracted the attention of a crowd of people. The residents were discussing something heatedly, saying that it was incredible. In front of them were the resources obtained from the most recent quest, many fangs and carcasses of animals. The residents asked in surprise whether the adventurers managed it themselves. Balina waved her hand, saying that it was indeed so. The girl said that she found them and Lint destroyed them. The guy blushed, saying that he did not do it alone. Lint added that Kagero deserves a lot of credit for this. Balina hugged him and said that this was absolutely normal because the guy was a tamer, which meant that he should fight like this. Now she suggested that they go and have a drink somewhere. The villagers shook Lint's hand, saying that he was very good. They also thanked him for the work he had done and for protecting the village. One of the women said that there were a lot of these rabbits in the area. Fields were destroyed and cattle were attacked. Ordinary people would definitely not cope because they would simply be crushed by the numbers. The villagers collected all the money in the village and gave it to the guild, as the adventurers probably noticed. However, it is surprising that such a strong man came to a poor village. Afterwards, they mentioned someone else, comparing him to Lint. Lint was surprised, asking if there really were any other adventurers here. The residents said that another person had come to them earlier, though he was separate from the guild. The guys thought about it. Later, they heard some kind of swearing coming from a barn nearby. The wounded man lay on bales of hay. Local church workers were helping him, asking the gentleman to be patient. The man shouted that he had come a long way for the mere pennies they were offering him. The stranger was outraged that the inhabitants did not have a single potion. He cursed the village he had decided to go to. Lint and Balina went inside to get acquainted with the village assistant. Balina indignantly said that this man was some kind of self-proclaimed B-rank adventurer. Lint said sarcastically that the man had apparently been bitten by baby rabbits. The adventurer stood up and urged the young man to watch his language. He also added that he belonged to a Vermont trading company. Balina turned and asked Lint if he knew anything about this organization. The guy replied that he only knew its name. The woman from the village clarified that they usually traded various foods and then decided to ask for help against these rabbits. Lint wanted to know more about the problems of the villagers. The woman also explained that they were charged 3 times more for this service than they had agreed on. Lint said that this was all against the rules of the contract. Balina said that if they were completely beaten, they probably wouldn't be able to help. The man yelled at Lint and Balina to shut up. He angrily announced that he was a representative of Vermont. Therefore, if he went to the right place and conveyed a few words, the guys would be in trouble. Balina quietly said, "Flash," changed dramatically when he found out who was standing in front of him. He first asked again, and then said that the girl herself was an A-rank beastman. Balina continued to look at him, folding her arms across her chest, and added that her rank was already S. The adventurer fell to his knees and asked him to forgive him for such insolence. Balina looked at him haughtily and reminded the man about the potion he had spoken about earlier. The man began waving his arms to the sides, pretending that this had never happened. Afterwards, he smiled and said that as soon as he was healed, he would immediately leave this village. The representative of Vermont did not want to be forever indebted to this village. Balina took out a small bottle of potion and began pouring it on the man's head. He apologized, but Balina clarified that she was only selling the potion, so the man would be in their debt. His wounds were instantly healed. The villagers were very surprised that such a thing was even possible, because the man recovered right before their eyes in a matter of seconds. Lint smiled and explained that Balina could restore anyone, even when only one ear was left. The only thing was that it was often very expensive. The man from the Vermont Trading Company looked at his hands happily, realizing that he was now completely healthy. He began to bow to Balina, expressing words of gratitude to her. Balina replied that you can't put a thank you in your pocket. The man took out his wallet and said that he would pay and wanted to know how much he owed. Balina smiled, holding a small bottle in her hands. She said that she was asking for the full price for it. The girl also assumed that the adventurer himself knew the price. When the boys had finished their business, they jumped on the dragon and began to leave the village. Lint noticed that Balina was unusually angry. She noted that it was because of that guy, for she did not understand how one could be so greedy. Lint said it was a great feeling. Balina replied that people like that only spoiled the impression of adventurers. Lint replied that it was, but in the end only that man was upset. Balina agreed. At that time, many domestic animals walked around him in the barn and defecated. Balina replied that he could not do anything else in this life, and his debt could be hung on the company. When they arrived, they left Gil in the forest near the capital as usual. They said goodbye to him and needed to decide what to do next. Balina said that they could take the tasks to the guild for now. The girl also intended to ask about Lint's promotion to rank C. Lint added that they could also have a bite to eat at the tavern, wash up and sleep, since Balina probably wanted that too. Sometime later, when Lint and Balina were already in the guild, something made the girl very angry. She screamed that she could not accept this and considered these circumstances strange. As it turned out, because Balina took the guy in and led him, and also had a rank much higher than his, the guild could not promote him. This is exactly what Balina was going to aggressively allow. The guild worker only said that they have such rules. It's just that according to Balina, they can't promote Lint. If the guy doesn't have his own powers, then there can be no talk of promotion. Balina immediately accused the guild worker of not even knowing the details. The girl pointed at Lint and said that he had tamed an entire dragon. Balina immediately attacked the worker with renewed vigor, saying that she apparently had nothing to say in response to this. The worker only laughed, saying that Balina was clearly confusing dreams and reality. The girl behind the counter said that she had seen many people who wanted to rise at the expense of their high-ranking friends. That was the reason she had to refuse. Lint approached Balina and began to calm her down, telling the girl not to make a fuss. He decided to find out for himself what the guy could do to get a promotion, since they did not believe them. The guild worker said that they had a special exam for such things. She also added that it was easy, and for dragon tamers it was easy. She also added sarcastically that the guy could take it with him tomorrow morning. Lint took these words seriously and thought for a moment and said that he would ask him to come after breakfast. The girl laughed and said that this was just great. Then she added that she would never believe it. Lint asked if there was anything else needed. The girl thought about it and said that the guy would also need to fight their examiner and show what a C rank is capable of. On the way home, Balina continued to complain, saying that something was clearly wrong with this worker. Balina added that this all really irritated her. She didn't like her at all from the start, so Balina urged Lint not to pay attention to it. Lint explained that this was just the fate of a tamer. Balina accused the guy of low self-esteem. They remembered that the guild worker had laughingly said that the examiner himself would be a B rank. Balina said again that she was only disappointed by all this talk. Lin said that the girl's name was Myra, apparently. In general, she seemed cute to him. Balina got angry, and seeing this, Lint immediately apologized, saying that his sharp tongue spoils everything. They were already approaching the hotel. Balina stretched and said that they needed to forget about it for the night. Lint threw up his hands and said that he actually had an exam tomorrow. Lint and Balina were alone together. The girl asked him to slow down a little and be less assertive. Lint replied that he didn't see anything wrong with all this because Balina liked it. Lint also said that he couldn't do otherwise with such a beautiful girl as Balina. The girl asked with a smile whether Lint would stop there. Morning came. Balina was still fast asleep, slightly covered with a thin blanket. Lint was already on his feet and had almost finished with his preparations for the exam. Lint did not wake the girl and gently said good morning to her. He also added that she always slept much longer. The guy turned to Kiryuk and said that it was time for them to move. When Balina woke up, Linta was no longer at home. She started to get out of bed, telling herself that she would hope for a good result in the exam. Afterwards, she stretched and thought. She was surprised by the fact that there was an examiner here. The girl also said that it would be funny if this was the one she thought of. In front of Lint stood a man in armor. He held his sword, which he threw over his shoulder, and introduced himself, calling himself Ghoul. He also said that he would be conducting the boys' exam. The guild worker saw Kiryuk and said that this must be his very small and cute dragon. The ghoul threw away the scabbard, saying that this was all just a farce. The examiner licked his blade, then said sarcastically that he would give Lint time to get home to his mother before he broke it or broke a few bones. Lint continued to stand confidently in place, after which he immediately asked if he could use pets. He wanted to know about this right away before starting. Ghoul laughed, saying that Lint could of course use them, even all of them. The man was sure that this would definitely not help the tamer. The guild worker asked if it was okay to say that. The girl explained that Ghoul had already retired, but he was still a former B-rank adventurer. Lint smiled and said that now that he had the information he needed, he had nothing to worry about and they could get to the beginning. The girl raised her hand and said that she declared the beginning of the exam to increase the rank of adventurer Lint open. Nobody immediately went on the attack. Both continued to stand in place and Lint even folded his hands together. Ghoul turned to the guy, saying that it was in vain that he did not attack because then he would start first. The ghoul rushed forward and immediately swung his sword. Kiryuk arrived in time and easily parried the blow with his blade, stopping it. This shocked the examiner. Afterwards, Kiryuk pushed him back a little, again greatly surprising Gull and Mila. Gull began to shake his head, saying that he just didn't hit the way he should have. At that moment, Lint shouted Kajero's name and a bright flame started to run around him. Ghoul watched all this and couldn't understand what kind of nonsense was going on here. Lint sped towards Ghoul and kicked him in the weapon arm. The sword immediately flew out of it to the side, leaving the man without any means of attack. The blade flew to the side and stuck into the tree. Mila saw this and fell to her knees, not believing her eyes. Lint stood in front of Gull and said that the man was unarmed. The guy wanted to know whether he should continue. Gull started yelling for the guy to stop and the man already understood everything. Lint leaned closer, saying that he didn't quite hear. Shul yelled that the guy had passed and would get his rank. Suddenly another voice was heard from behind Gulia. It was Bylina. The girl approached them and said that she had taught them earlier that a book cannot be judged by its cover. Bylina stopped and yawned. Gull immediately screamed in shock when he saw his teacher. He couldn't understand why the girl was traveling with this ignorance. Bylina said that he was her master. Afterwards, Bylina smiled and said that she could continue the fight since the judge had not yet left the fight, which meant the exam was still going on. Gull only laughed in response. The man said that it was an individual exam, so she could not interfere. But before he could finish speaking, he had already received a blow to the face. Bylina urged him to keep his eyes open. The ghoul fell to the ground, losing several teeth. Myra was very scared. Lin approached her and addressed her as if she were a judge. The guy asked if he had any violations. The girl pointed her finger behind her back, her eyes wide open. Lint understood what she meant, confirming everything. Afterwards, he introduced his dragon, saying its name. The guy added that Gil was a little late. Suddenly, Lint noticed that something was clearly wrong with Myra. He looked down and saw that a small puddle had formed under her feet. Lint did not expect that he had surprised her so much. After everyone came to their senses, Gull and Myra bowed their heads and asked to accept their apologies. They also added that they really could not imagine that such a thing was possible. Myra also asked the boys to forget their mistake. Myra took out a small envelope and handed it to Lint. The guy was pleasantly surprised, recognizing his new guild card. The guy noted that they worked quickly. Myra said that Mr. Lint is now a C-rank adventurer. Myra also added that she did everything quickly because of her behavior yesterday, as she wanted to rehabilitate herself. Then she turned to Bylina and clasped her hands together in a pleading manner. The girl asked him never to tell anyone about this, because she didn't want to lose her job. Bylina asked with a smile whether there really was so little work here that might suit a girl. Myra added that she would do anything. Here Bylina thought, because the girl, apparently, really was ready for anything. Bylina leaned towards her and said what Myra would need to do to make amends to Lint. Myra blushed deeply and then walked away. Bylina turned to Guillem and said that he was next. She pointed her finger at him and told the man to undergo retraining, and a brutal one at that. Afterwards, they mounted the dragon and flew off to do their business. Lint took out the map and was glad to see it updated. He showed it to Kiryuk and noticed that the C-rank maps were already sparkling and shimmering very beautifully. With all this, Lint was now also a full-fledged adventurer, which he was very happy about. Bylina smiled and added that very soon the guy could already become a B or a rank. Afterwards, Bylina said that they were moving on. Lint thought that the girl had already managed to find a healer. Bylina confirmed everything, saying that the saint should already be waiting for them. Lint was surprised. The guy said that even if they said that they knew Bylina, she was a saint of the divine people. Bylina confirmed everything, saying that they could not meet just as friends. After Bylina said that the saint is also an S-rank adventurer, and that is the pure truth. Lint said that the girl must be very talented, because she is a holy maiden and an adventurer at the same time. Bylina laughed, saying that Lint would soon see everything for himself. She also added that she was currently swamped with work and Lint would need to look after her. Afterwards, Bylina exclaimed decisively that they were now going to find the best healer in the world. They were going on a magnificent journey through the sky. Lint, however, remained slightly excited. Meanwhile, a certain person put his hand on the book. The girl was indignant that some annoying noise was bothering her outside. She rose from her chair and thought that now there was also something very important. The girl needed to clearly understand what she should do now. At the same time, the city was being besieged. One of the knights shouted for the warriors to begin breaking through the city gates. The battering ram turned the gates into splinters and the army broke through. A large-scale battle began. Amid the clanking of swords and the clatter of shields, shouts could also be heard. Someone ordered to find the priest, saying that he must be somewhere nearby. The girl in the cassock went to the window and looked down. She asked how things were going on the battlefield. She was told that Cardinal Harem seemed to be a mere underling with power. He has such enormous power that he divided it in two in the lands of the gods. It seems that he was not so simple, although he really had power. But apparently this worries him the least. His ability to act, his ability to understand the human heart, and something else, the most important thing. The main thing was the best time to realize the opportunity. Now they could use the strongest card in their arsenal, while the Baron, the leader of the Dragon Knights, is missing. Afterwards, the girl began to turn away from the window and thought that such a decision could be a mistake. She was still interested in whether the Cardinal could really do it. The Saint looked around her bohemian room. Everything one could wish for a comfortable life was here, but this place still remained disgusting. All this takes away her true freedom. She felt as if she were in a cage without windows and doors. Suddenly, an explosion thundered in the tower where the Holy Virgin was. The explosion itself was of enormous force and began to scatter splinters and stones in different directions. The people who remained below saw all this and did not understand what had happened there. They understood that the tower had simply gone and exploded. It seemed simply impossible to them. Afterwards, they all sighed when they saw the Holy Virgin. They were very worried about her and began to ask if she was okay. The girl asked the servants not to worry because she simply could not find a way out. Afterwards, the Holy Virgin loudly uttered her question, trying to find out where her father was now. She insistently demanded an answer. The two men in armor were very surprised by this. Lint and Bylina were already heading to the Holy Virgin. Lint thought they were going to the Holy Lands to meet her. Bylina said that she had wanted it that way at first, but plans had changed abruptly. Lint began to find out more about what their further plan was. Bylina said that there was simply someone she wanted to talk to before visiting there. Afterwards, Bylina said that it would take them an hour to fly to the capital. The girl said that since they had nothing to do now, Lint could tell some interesting story. The boy said that Bylina should at least give him a topic or an example. The girl said that she would be interested to know about how they met Kuryuk and how Lint became a tamer. Lint smiled, saying that these two stories were very boring and tedious. Byleza laughed and leaned against Lint, saying that it was quite normal and she wanted to hear about them anyway. Bylina said that if Lint resisted, she would make him do it herself. The girl put his hand on her chest. Lint licked his lips and said that if that's what she wanted, he would tell her. The guy started by saying that he was born in the village of Fremel, which is on the border with the Holy Land. There they had a very small guild if you compare it to the one in the capital. The guy also said that he was an unregistered adventurer, but the girl Rumi helped him with money, always giving a little extra for the tasks he did. The guy lived in a small abandoned house and made plans. He had only one way to survive: to become an adventurer. He needed to buy the necessary equipment, but he had no money at all. As soon as he had a chance for big money, high-ranking colleagues took him away. Lint was upset by all this. The guy threw his glove aside, which he was stitching, saying that it was all in vain. Lint blamed himself for the fact that he had no normal skills at all. The guy understood perfectly well that he needed to get at least something, otherwise he would not see either money or life. Lint thought that this world was quite harsh in fact. The boy looked up where there was a hole in the roof and the stars were visible. He decided that he would go to study and decided to do it from tomorrow. The boy made himself an imitation weapon out of wood and began practicing on the bushes nearby. He trained for the next few days. He continued to make his way forward and suddenly realized that he saw some new and unknown landscape around him. The guy could not believe that he was lost and things were bad. Although in that case, Lint decided that something unknown might be waiting for him ahead. Now he was determined to go forward to meet adventures. Walking further, Lint suddenly stumbled and rolled down. When he emerged from behind the bush, the first thing the guy saw when he was able to get up was a small cave. Now Lint began to guess whether this was the only entrance to it. If the cave was simple, then yes, but what if these were some kind of dungeon ruins? The boy thought that these could also be the ruins of something else. He took out his torch and lit it, saying that now was the time to go forth to meet adventures. When Lint went inside and answered some part of the dungeon, he was surprised by its size. The guy thought that the space here is quite large. He touched one of the walls, realizing that the stones here were not real. This immediately led the guy to the idea that a human hand had definitely been here, and Lint was sure of it. When he had walked a little further, he realized that these were ruins after all. Lint was delighted, realizing that he had struck it lucky. There might be treasures waiting ahead. Lint went forward, but suddenly found that the passage quickly ended. He realized that this was the end, and then wondered why they did not have enough space. There were several sheets of paper under his foot. The guy understood that it was slightly burnt paper, and Lint could not even imagine that it could somehow look like a treasure map or something like that. On the sheet of paper, the guy saw a girl who was almost completely naked. He was disappointed by this, realizing that everything here was strewn with only such images. Lint began to kick the paper under his feet angrily, but suddenly noticed that among all this there were sheets of high-quality, expensive paper. It was already noticeably different in value. The boy bent down and picked up a few sheets of paper, shining the torch on them. In the lower right corner, he noticed an illegible coat of arms that marked each page. Perhaps this was the treasure he needed. Lint thought that if he collected everything, he could make money. He found several sheets of paper and took a break, starting to read the pages. Lint quickly realized that it was some kind of textbook. The young man raised the papers up and joyfully shouted that he had finally found something unusual. Such things are usually worth more than any treasure. Lint soon realized that this was a textbook on simplification. The guy was upset and did not understand why, of all the possible ones, he had come across this one. It is said that there used to be fierce warriors who could even make dragons obey. A skill that allows you to control monsters and make them fight for you. Lint thought that these descriptions seemed useful, but there was another half of the coin. He was very confused and closed his eyes in thought. The hero thought about how it was possible to walk with these monsters everywhere, and how he would live alone among the monsters. And people don't consider it a full-time job, because the tamers only use the strength of the trained animals, and at that time they themselves cannot fight. The hero understood their thoughts perfectly well and why they did not take him into the group. Because why would they need such people? So the textbook he found broke even the slightest hope, and he thinks he will have to be patient. However, if Lint continues to be a low-ranking adventurer, the book will be of great help in battles because he does not even have money for weapons. A life in which you can't see more than 10 minutes. Therefore, the hero decided that he would take everything from life and become a tamer himself. He was very determined because he thought about his choice well. So he slapped his knee and said that things couldn't get any worse. So he would become a C-rank loner and be cool. Lint said with a smile that adventures were full of excitement and he would not miss the chance to enjoy them, so he would become a tamer. He thought that maybe this was his calling. The hero lit the pages of the book with a torch and read the legend of the tamer. He was surprised that dragon tamers really existed. It shocked him. Then he found the beginner pages. Right after that, the hero declared that this was what he needed. He guessed what was written there and then began to read the content, which began with the possible number of tamed monsters. After that, there were pages about how to tame monsters, about the difficulty of taming, about tricks. And all of this was important to him. Lint then found information about the monsters and stated that it was valuable information to him. The hero thought that it was very strange that everything in the book was remembered quite easily. The guy smiled and said that he was interested in what kind of monsters could be tamed, and how he was looking forward to it. The hero imagined a minotaur which would be strong and steadfast, or some bird so that he could fly. And he would also be very lucky if he could find their egg. Lint immediately dismissed these thoughts because these monsters are too strong for him. And besides, there will be nowhere to fly because he is alone. The guy noted that the book also talks about who can be tamed first. And if it doesn't work with monsters, then you can try animals. Having finished reading, the guy stood up, took the torch and lifted the pages of the book up. After which he joyfully announced that he needed to get out already, and also that he hoped that he would come across someone good. After finishing the story about the book, Lint and Bylina continued to fly. The guy touched the girl and she asked him to stop. He asked with a smile if she didn't like it, but the girl answered that it was not about that. Bylina turned to him over her shoulder and asked him to show her the coat of arms that was on the book if he could. The guy said that there was no problem. And then he reflected that he was, frankly, so dirty that he was incomprehensible. He added that depending on how you looked at him, he could be a star. The girl took out a book and showed a symbol in the form of an 8-pointed star on it, asking if it looked the same. Lint was very surprised that she knew this symbol. Bylina confirmed that she was indeed familiar with it. The guy started pestering her with questions about what it meant and how valuable this book was. The girl thought about it and said that it really was very valuable. The adventuress raised her hand to her mouth and wondered where to begin. The hero was very tense and waited for an explanation. He also remarked that Bylina was very beautiful when she was serious. The girl blushed at these words, and then she shouted about why he embarrassed her so much. The guy apologized with a smile. Bylina, deciding to change the subject, started talking about the book. The girl started talking about this book with a star, as he called it. Lint asked what was wrong with it and who wrote it. She replied that she would explain it gradually. Bylina suggested continuing. The guy didn't understand what exactly to continue, and the girl explained that she meant the story of his meeting with Kuryuk. Lint looked at his pet and said that it was more than just a meeting. It was strange. Somewhere deep in the forest, the boy flew towards a tree, skidding across the grass and eventually crashing head-on into it. The goblin who hit him looked at him very angrily and walked away, leaving him on the ground. When Lint got up from the ground, he said that everything did not go as planned and also wondered why the goblin did not agree to be tamed. He did not expect it to be so difficult. However, he understood perfectly well that he had nothing that he could give them in return for the contract, and at the same time, these were the weakest monsters. So, having resigned himself, the guy decided that he would take the slime. This would be enough for the first step, after which he began to call the slime. As he passed through the bushes, he noticed slugs on the ground behind them. Lint smiled that there were 5 of them at once and decided to start with the largest one. However, upon closer inspection, the hero was very surprised that 2 slugs were bullying one. The slug was very scared and shaking. Lint, looking out from the bushes, thought that the 2 attackers looked the strongest. The frightened slug turned around sharply and looked at the guy. Lint was surprised and wondered why he was looking at him like that. The frightened slug looked at him pleadingly, and the guy was surprised by such a desperate look. After which he came out from behind the bushes and said that it seemed he had no choice, so he would help. Lint leaned over and said that he would save it, but in return the slug would have to be fixed. The boy would tame it and then he wouldn't be allowed to complain. The slug began to nod understandingly. Lint could only hope that it really understood. Then he extended his hand, thinking that he didn't look like a being that could help, but this was his first step. The boy concentrated, closed his eyes and used the taming skill. After that, he continued to hold his hand outstretched, opened his eyes and saw that nothing had changed with the slime. The slug continued to just stand there and look at Lint. At that moment, Lint realized that he could now read the monster's thoughts, and thanks to this, he understood that he was thinking about taming it. Then the slug turned around, looked angrily ahead and started to leave. Lint was very confused and asked where he was going. The guy shouted why he was leaving, reminding him that the monster needed his help earlier. Lint continued to shout that even he can defeat them, and it is not dangerous for him at all, so he asks the tamed monster to come back. Lint turned around and saw the slugs that had attacked earlier start to leave. He and his tamed slug watched them go. And then the slug exhaled very happily, announcing his victory. Lint squatted down next to him and said that he was too smug. And then he realized that the monster had protected him, for which he thanked him. The slug was happy to help. Lint put his hand behind his head and said that in any case, now he understood what taming meant, and also noted that, in addition to all these difficulties, there is a limit on the number of tamed monsters. So Lint said he would remove the shackles from the newly tamed slime. The monster looked at the guy strangely, and he confirmed that he would indeed remove them. Lint rose to his feet and told the slug that he now believed the slug could survive. So he said goodbye to it. The hero began to retreat back through the bushes, and the monster ran after him with high leaps. Having caught up, the slug began to jump around the hero, and he confusedly reminded him that he was already free, so he did not understand why he did not stay. The monster continued to follow him. Then the tamed slug jumped onto Lint's shoulder, completely confusing him. The boy asked him to stop. The monster sat on the hero's shoulder and showed a confident look. Lint asked if the slug was laughing at him. Then he exhaled and said that if the monster had nowhere to go, then in that case he could follow him, but he had to behave himself. The slug happily agreed, and Lint said that then he was glad to meet him. Then he began to think about giving him a name, because no matter how you look at it, he can't just be slime. The boy then shouted out a version of the name Kuryuk to him, asking if he liked it, and explaining his choice by saying that it looked like jelly. The monster began to happily jump on the guy's shoulder, and he smiled and said that he really liked it, apparently. And that meant that they decided that his name was now Kuryuk. Lint began to tell him that this is how they began to travel together, continuing their way through the forest together. Kuryuk sat on his shoulder, and the boy showed him the way. However, at some point the slug began to attract the hero's attention. He decided to look at it and asked what had happened. The monster jumped off the boy's shoulder when it realized he had noticed it and started running in some direction. Lint ran after it and shouted for it to stop. The guy asked what he was doing and reminded him that they didn't have time for that anyway. Kuryuk continued to insist on his own, calling for them to follow him. Lint was very dissatisfied with his arbitrariness. The boy continued to run after the slug leading him, and then something caught his attention, so he stopped and looked down at his feet. Lint fell to his knees in surprise and began examining the bells, realizing that they were very rare. Kuryuk happily jumped next to him. The guy picked one of the plants and said in surprise that they were used to make complex potions. He then turned to his assigned monster and asked if he had seen him collecting them. The slug nodded in agreement. The very happy hero lifted the tamed slug up in his arms and began to talk about how incredible he was, and also to idolize him. And then he began to zealously collect plants, saying that it was as if he had earned money in 3 days. After which he turned to the slug and said with a smile that today he would treat him to some delicious food. At that moment the slug began to eat the grass and nod. The boy called out to Kuryuk and told him in confusion that these plants were very expensive. However, he agreed after that and they continued to collect grass together. Lint and Kuryuk began to return from the forest, village, guild office. The street in front of it is bustling with life. Many are selling goods, transporting them on a cart. Guild worker Remy is upset sorting the sheets, collecting them together. She thinks about how Lint hasn't been in the guild for a few days. Then she gathers the papers into a folder and starts wondering if he's okay. And at that moment, the conversations of people in the guild caught her attention. They were asking about what kind of baby it was and whether it was dead. The Remy guild workers turned around and saw 2 men touching Lint with smiles on their faces, who had come back from a walk in the forest. The girl immediately ran, pushing aside the other men on the way and grabbed the guy by the cheeks with her hands, greatly embarrassing him. Lint looked at Remy, confused. The girl began to carefully examine the guy for various wounds. And then she exhaled and said that she was very glad that he was alive, immediately asking where he had been. She was angry with him because she was very worried. Lint greeted the girl and apologized. And then, with a smile, he took the bag off his shoulders, opened it, and said that he had found a good place and collected a little bit there. The guy gave Remy a bag of grass. The girl couldn't believe her eyes, being very surprised by such a number of bells. After which she said that she would conduct an assessment. But before that, her attention was drawn to the mucus that was on the guy's shoulder. She looked at it carefully and asked what kind of slime it was. The guy absent-mindedly replied that he was now a tamer. The girl smiled brightly and asked again if he really was a tamer. And then she started shouting that Lint had become a tamer. She started talking about how incredible it was and how he was able to obtain an unusual skill. The guy asked Remy not to speak too loudly because it was a simple taming. However, the men who had teased him recently heard Remy's words and asked him again what had happened to him and whether he really was a tamer. Another said that this was a good reason to tease him even more. Happy Remy began to ask with a smile if it was possible to touch the animal tamed by Lint, and also asked what his name was. The guy agreed and answered that his name was Kuryuk. The girl began to stroke the slime, which she clearly liked. She talked about how good, cute, and soft he was. However, at that moment someone called out to the boy, calling him Mr. Tamer. These words made Lint flinch. The men walked around the guy from 3 sides. One of them started asking if this tamed monster could even walk on its own. Another said that this was a monster worthy of a guy with mediocre skills. The third laughed, standing nearby. One of the men slapped Lint across the face and said that they were waiting for him outside. The guy closed his eyes from this weak blow. Remy began to apologize for not being able to hold back and shouting it out loud. She also said that she forgot that tamers don't like. The guy, holding his face, said that everything was fine and he was sure that it would be like that. Remy took Lint's hand, greatly embarrassing the boy, and said that in any case it was an incredible skill and now it was clear what he would do. She was sincerely happy for him and the boy blushed. The girl let go of his hand and with a bright smile asked if this meant that even the dragons would be under him now, and also said that she would make an assessment. So she respectfully asked him to wait. Lint was very happy with the girl's attention, folding his hands together. The 2 men behind him looked at the guy darkly and angrily. One of them couldn't stand it and grabbed the guy by the collar with a very angry face. He called out to Lint, who turned around in fear. The man lifted Lint by the collar off the ground and told him to be careful, because if he touched Remy, who they considered an angel with even a finger, then he and the others would not leave him so easily. At that moment, the girl rang the bell and called the guy by name. Lint and the man holding him by the collar looked back. She leaned on the counter, continuing to ring the bell, and shouted that she had done the assessment and congratulated the guy. The girl was incredibly happy and shouted congratulations that he had now been promoted to E rank. Lint jumped up so much that even the man holding him fell down and happily asked again if he had really been promoted, not believing it. The guy couldn't believe it, so he ran up to the reception desk and started asking again if he had really been promoted. He also asked why this happened, assuming he had already accumulated points. Remy replied that this was also taken into account, but it was not the main reason. The guild worker explained that what he brought was not part of his quest route. She also told him with a smile that he had taken a risk by entering an area with a large number of monsters. Up until now, he had only walked in safe areas. Now, the fact that he had walked a route with a large number of monsters meant that the guild had recognized his courage. Was the boy really shocked by these words? Lint didn't understand what courage had to do with it because he had simply decided to change his life a little. Happy for his achievements, Remy said with a smile that the first steps in adventures are the most important, especially the first steps for adventurers. The guy accepted the reward and happily left the guild building, walking along the path through the village. He turned to his tamed beast Kuryuk and said that a lot had happened today, but it was a very good day for him. The slug happily agreed. His partner suddenly became a big shot. Lint also noticed that Remy praised him too much and was too kind to him. He spoke out loud about his achievements, namely Master Tamer Lint, and noted that this was a great start. So he raised his hand up and said that he would go forward to his goal. Some time passed, the heroes were still in their village, which was seething with life. People were walking along the streets between the big houses. Remy touched the slug Kuryuk and commented on how cute he was, who in turn was happy with the girl's attention. The girl then looked up into the hero's eyes and said that she felt like he was getting fluffier and fluffier every time. The guy replied that maybe that was true, and he no longer believed that Kuryuk was originally a slime. Remy wondered if it was possible because of taming. The boy replied that he didn't know and he didn't think slime usually changed like that. Kuryuk flew up from the boy's waist, and the boy said in confusion that he didn't believe slime could learn to fly either. The girl said it was very cute. Then she remembered that she had some good news for the guy. Lint was surprised by this and asked her to tell him. The girl took out her guild worker's bell and started ringing it. The guy was very confused, not believing that this was really happening. Guild worker Remy began to congratulate Lint on being promoted to D rank with a smile, loudly ringing the bell. The boy and his furry tame animal were incredibly happy. The girl handed him the document and said that from now on it was his identification card. The guy was very surprised, looked at it and said that he was very grateful. Remy also added that he had worked hard for the past 2 years with his pet. The boy hugged him with a smile and said that it was all thanks to him. The girl then handed him an envelope and said that there was one more thing she needed to do. She handed him the envelope and said that it was a letter from their guild leader. The guy was very surprised and asked again if he had really heard correctly that it was from the guild leader. He did not believe that he had written him a letter. The men who were in the guild at the time heard the conversation, especially after Lint's shout, and began to discuss whether the leader really wrote it. The guy waited, looked around in confusion, and asked if he could read it. His pet was very happy about these events, and the girl explained to him that of course he could, so he should do it right now. Bylina, to whom the hero told this story, asked him what was written in this letter. The guy answered her with a smile that there was a congratulation on the promotion, touching the girl. She asked if that was really all that was written there. He answered that of course not, there were a little more surprises. He told his companion that the head of the guild of their small town was also a tamer, and also that he sent him to the capital. The girl at that moment was very embarrassed by Lint's touches. They were quite close at this point, so the girl even screamed. After which she noted that this was exactly why he was summoned to the capital. Lint confirmed this. Then Bylina turned to him and asked what happened next. The boy replied that he had found a cave and lived there. The girl took a deep breath and said that maybe they would need to go back to the boy's homeland. She wiped her forehead tiredly, and the boy asked why they would need to go back. Lint reminded her that it was a terrible place, and the girl assured him that it wasn't so terrible. And Bylina also said that in any case, at this point he is already a dragon tamer with an S-rank companion. Then she hugged the guy around the neck and said that they would go to the capital first, asking if he had any objections. The guy, confused, replied that he agreed, after which Bylina told him that she really wanted even more of his attention. Lint sheepishly told her that he would give it, but not in flight. She told him that there are no places where you can't become close at that moment. The guy asked her to stop, and she answered that she wanted it right here and now. Sometime later, near the capital, people were ringing the bell furiously, warning of the impending danger. The warrior with the sword was shouting at the top of his voice that a dragon had been spotted, and for everyone to be ready for a dragon attack. Another man was also giving orders for the crossbows to be prepared. The warriors used bows and crossbows, taking their positions and getting ready. They were given the order to get ready, and when the large crossbow was also drawn, they waited for the moment when they could shoot. Lint shouted for Bylina to hear him. He told the girl that they couldn't just fly in on a dragon. The dragon they spotted in the sky was the hero's tamed beast. Lint and Bylina had already reached the capital, which was surrounded by large walls, and the houses were much more luxurious and taller. Bylina looked at Lint with a smile and asked if this was his debut as a dragon tamer. And besides, there was at least someone in the guild who didn't know the S-rank adventurer like Bylina. Lint replied that she was right, but noted that it looked like the warriors below were preparing to attack. The guy asked her if she was a high-ranking adventurer, and the girl replied that there was nothing wrong with jumping off a dragon. So she said that she would go and explain everything and come back. Lint was shocked by these words of the girl. However, she did not answer and jumped down from the dragon, simply telling him to wait for her. Lint was shocked and excited by such an action of his companion. He said that he understood everything, but he still couldn't help but worry. Balina grabbed the spire of one of the buildings, thereby stopping her flight. Lint said that in any case they needed to fly higher because at such a height, arrows and crossbow bolts could reach them. As they took off, he thought about who Balina wanted him to meet in the capital. The guy looked down, and after some time he noticed that it seemed that all the problems had already been solved. The dragon also looked in that direction. Balina stood in front of the soldiers and waved her hand at them. She shouted that the dragon gill could descend. Lint and the dragon landed in front of her, and the hero thanked her for resolving the problems rather peacefully because he expected something different from her. The girl asked, displeased, what that was supposed to mean. The soldiers with spears were shocked and could not believe their eyes. One of them said that this was a real dragon tamer. Balina answered with a smile that it was real and that was why she told him so. Lint climbed down from the back of the dragon gill and noticed Balina and the soldiers looking away in concern. They were all surprised and looked at someone approaching. Lint approached Balina and also looked in that direction. The one everyone was looking at was a man with a hood and a staff. He said he was flattered that Lint had succeeded. The boy was confused and asked Balina who she wanted to introduce him to. The girl stood there relaxed and smiling, then turned to the boy and asked him to show her Kajero. Lint was surprised, asked again, and then agreed. He concentrated and called out to Kajero, who answered him. After which the flames of the beast flared up around the hero, and he asked if everything was okay. The hooded man was shocked and said that this was spirit possession, and that the summoned one was a high-ranking fire wolf. Balina smiled contentedly at this reaction and noted that Lint was so capable. Then she suggested that they put away their shells. The hooded man smiled and replied that it was his mistake, then introduced himself as Violento, the head of the Capital's Guild. Lint looked at the man with a smile, then asked again and was very surprised when he realized it. The hero asked in confusion if he really was the boss, and Violento turned around and, laughing, replied that further conversation was not for the street, so he suggested that Lint go for a walk. After a while, they entered the building. Lint and Kiruk were looking around, while Violento and Balina walked ahead and discussed something. Lint then called out to Balina, who became embarrassed and asked him what he wanted. The guy replied that it was not what she thought, and then he started asking why she had brought him to him and whether it was too much. He was confused. The girl replied that although Violento was the head of the Capital's Guild, he had previously been an adventurer like her, so he shouldn't be afraid. Lint replied that he didn't understand, and therefore asked her not to speak so casually. Balina pointed out that both she and the Sacred Maiden were S-rank adventurers. The boy said that was true, but he was still confused. Violento opened the doors and said that the heroes could settle in, and also that if they needed anything, they could say so and it would be brought to them. Joyful Balina jumped onto the sofa and said that she would sit there. Lint also sat down on the chair and said that he didn't think that the room he had assigned would be different from the rest of the guild. Violento explained that many different meetings were held in this room, so secrets were kept very well there. Balina said that the room was also called Violento, after the head of the Capital Guild. The man called out to the girl and said that he was a loving husband and asked her not to forget about it. The girl, laughing sarcastically, asked about the ladies who sometimes come here, and then immediately clarified to Linta that she had not been here yet. The guy was embarrassed and replied that he was no longer worried about it. Balina came up to him, hugged his head and pressed it to her lush forms, asking why he wasn't worried about her. The guy, waving his arms, shouted that he was just joking. Violento drew the hero's attention to himself. Balina and Lint looked at him, remaining in the same position, and he suggested that they get down to business right away because they needed to discuss further actions. The girl let go of the guy and said that she wanted to talk about Saint Lily. Violento was surprised by her words. Balina took a confident stance and made a statement that she had to save Lily. Lint, trying to come to his senses, asked how she wanted to help and how much Balina knew about the saint. The man grabbed his beard and thought about it. Balina told Lint that she really wanted to help and then turned to the guild leader and said that her heart was breaking. Lint was surprised and asked what it meant. Balina and Violento looked at the guy strangely, and he explained that he meant what it meant to be torn apart. He spread his arms out to the sides and asked if the plan wasn't to just invite her into the group. Balina said that Lily, as she calls her, or full name Lilia, and herself, are both students of Master Violento. Lint was very surprised and noted that this meant that his companion had studied here. And then he asked why she was helping him then, since saints occupy a rather high position in the divine realm. Guildmaster Violento said that he would explain the current state of the divine realm to him, because Balina had trouble understanding it. They approached the table and Violento unfolded the map. He pointed his staff to the center and said that it was a map of a kingdom. Lint was surprised to notice that it was small. The man said that it was one of the smallest states and also the northernmost. The guild leader asked him what he was thinking. Lint replied that it looked like the people around him were attacking the country quite often, and guessing, he asked if it was because of divine protection. Balina calmly asked him again about the kingdom of God, and answered that it was the land of wizards. Lint cried out that it couldn't be and that it was incredible, and the girl threw up her hands and said that there were rumors that only wizards could be born there. And then she pointed out that it was true because children who couldn't use magic were killed. Lint shouted that it was depressing, folding his arms in horror, after which he realized that for this reason no one attacks them because you need to be extremely careful. Violento said that recently in this country of the gods there was a coup d'etat. The guy was very surprised by the coup. The guild leader said he was curious if Lint had heard of the despotic rule of Pope Zarathustra. The boy replied that his hometown of Framel was on the border, so he knew a little. He said that they claim that in all corners of the country a certain religion prevails, worshipping the Pope, who is considered the representative of God, and people living there cannot freely leave the country. Lint also noted that he too can rely on God when things go badly, but constantly asking him is very difficult. And he explained that this is the suffocation of the people. Guildmaster Violento thoughtfully said the word suffocation and said that many felt the same way. Lint asked about the man planning a coup. Violento agreed, adding that there was a man here who had gathered everything necessary. Cardinal Harem, the second man in the divine kingdom and the leader of the coalition against the Pope. He is fiercely opposed to the Pope, and now that he has dealt with the Pope's vassals, he has bared his fangs. Harem raised his hand up and shouted the order to kill the dirty daddy because the tyrant must die. He spread his arms and continued shouting that God was blessing their lands. People stood in front of him and shouted enthusiastically. Balina put her hand behind her head and noted that both were tyrants, but such things were fair if they were staged by a public favorite. Lint asked her what it meant that the coup would definitely happen. The girl agreed and said that, unfortunately, Harem had made one important mistake. And then she said with a smile that she had lost Lily and her dad. And that means the saint is with the folder. She told Lint that she was sure that Lily remained on his side. However, she also added that they should have already reached this kingdom, because she received a call for help from Lily. Lint was surprised, stood up and asked Balina that they would also help the Pope. The girl answered that he and the saint. After which she asked to listen and began to explain that Lily wanted to be free, and as she had said before, she was the same adventurer. Then her companion smiled and said that in such a turmoil, the status of a saint was absolutely unimportant. And besides, neither the Pope nor Harem would allow such a thing, because the existence of saints is important in the kingdom of God. Violento was also sitting nearby and listening to their conversation. As they say, the saint is close to God. Her influence is enough to legitimize them for any side, and it is not something to carry around like divine favor. Guildmaster Violento noted that the situation was becoming an interethnic problem, because the Pope intended to use the military power of this country for his return. And he also noted that if that happened, the soldiers would end up on one side and the mages on the other. Lint tensed up a little. Violento raised his hand and said that in order to avoid this, he was going to interfere with all attempts to meet between the Pope and the King, but the guild was outside politics. Lint smiled, understanding what the man was getting at, and said that it meant illegal work. Violento nodded in agreement and said that he would bequeath this secret mission to Lint. The boy shuddered, thinking about being entrusted with a secret mission from the guild. The head of the capital guild looked at Lint and asked if 100 gold coins would be enough for him. The guy winced in shock, thinking about 100 gold coins, and then, confused, began asking to wait, remembering how many silver coins there were in one gold coin. Then he began to count, shook his head, and said that it was somehow not enough. Violento added that in addition to the money, this is his personal request, but along with this, a promotion to B rank is possible. Lint fell to his knees, exhausted, and threw his head back, thinking about 100 gold coins and a promotion. Balina laughed, noting that the guy had become very motivated. Lint replied that this was not so because he did not know how to pull it off. For him, these were incredible figures. His companion pulled him by the hand and said with a smile that she was motivated, so she suggested that he take action and see Lily as soon as possible. Then she turned to the guild leader and said, addressing him as a master, that she would quickly handle this together with Lint. Violento answered his student that this work is not so simple, looking her seriously in the eyes. The girl stopped and asked the reason, because she would just kill Dad and there would be no problems. Violento extended his finger and said that this puzzle should have already been completed. The girl suddenly realized something, and then said the words about the commander of the Dragon Kingdom, Baron. Lint looked at the girl strangely, asking her who it was. Balina replied that it was the Dragon Hunter Baron, the greatest obstacle in their adventure. Some time has passed. Night. a house among tall trees on the branches of which sit unknown monsters. There are unconscious bodies of soldiers on the ground near this house. Kiryuk cried out happily, and Lint raised his hand to him and asked him not to make a sound. He was peeking out from behind a bush and explaining that they could be heard. According to the information he had to stick to the plan. Balina told him and Kiryuk to wait at this place and that they would soon see the saint. Then a whistle sounded and Lint immediately realized that it was a signal. After which he ran out and ran along the paths, after which he met Balina. She stood there out of breath and was glad to see the hero. The girl said that she couldn't wait any longer. Lint hugged the girl and asked what happened and if she was okay. The girl approached him and hurried the guy. She reminded him with a wide smile that he loved her cat ears, remembering how he touched them with his lips. The guy blushed deeply. Balina grabbed his hand and started running, pulling him along with her and saying that she couldn't hold herself back any longer, so they needed to go to Lily faster. The guy closed his eyes and asked the girl if she really wanted to do this by breaking into the saint's house. Balina ran with him up the steps into the house, telling him that she wouldn't swear, so he shouldn't worry. As they ran past, Lint noticed more and more unconscious bodies of soldiers lying on the ground, and Balina just screamed that she wanted to go to bed as quickly as possible. At that moment, the girl from the bathhouse heard a noise outside, turned around and wondered what was going on there. She realized that it was already late, so she thought that Cardinal Harem had already arrived, so she began to go out. However, Lint and Balina appeared at the door and broke the door down. The girl addressed her as Lily. Shocked, Lily turned to the hero's companion by name in surprise, and could not believe that she was here. The fabric fell down, causing Lily to scream and Balina to smile as she met her friend. Saint Lily shouted to Balina that she had come very suddenly. The girl sat down and picked up her cloth, blushing deeply. After which she asked who the guy next to her was. Lint closed his eyes a little and said hello. Balina happily pointed at Lint with a smile and introduced him. Lily politely asked her to stop because she hadn't seen Balina for so long and she was acting like this. Lint still couldn't come to his senses. Saint Lily was embarrassed, pointed her finger at him and shouted at him to stop staring or he would be held accountable for his actions to the fullest extent. The hero turned away and Balina laughed. Then Balina put her finger to her face and said that as Lint's wife, she could tell that the guy knew how to be responsible. Saint Lily was very surprised, asking what she meant. Lily clarified that these were just words because when she said it, she did not mean anything like that. Balina approached the girl and began to whisper in her friend's ear, causing her face to change. Then the girl tensed up and they looked at the guy strangely, approaching each other. He didn't understand what was happening. Saint Lily thought about it, and although she felt very awkward, she said that if there was no other choice, then she agreed. After a while, Lily said that she was inexperienced, so she politely asked Lint not to be strict with her. The guy put his hand behind his head, became embarrassed and asked if she was sure, and then looked at the girl. Saint Lily placed her hands on her ample form and nodded, saying that she wanted to be as strong as Balina. She looked at the hero with a pleading look. Balina laughed at this and said that she had just whispered to her that she had been tamed by Lint, so she couldn't help herself. Balina put her hand on Lint's shoulder and asked him about how he didn't want to miss such a chance. The guy still hesitantly agreed while Lily listened and waited. Then Lint realized that he might never see such a curvy figure again. So he reached out, finally realizing that this was the chance of a lifetime. Saint Lily closed her eyes and turned away, beginning to make sounds. Lint touched her with his hands very carefully and diligently, becoming more and more daring with each passing second. The saint was enjoying herself a lot while working with Lint. Her face was completely covered in a blush. Lint was squeezing the saint's lush forms, which caused pleasure for the latter. She thought it was incredible. Lint continued to squeeze the saint's lush forms with interest and agility. The saint received incredible pleasure from this. She understood that these were incredible sensations for her. Lint continued to touch the saint's body with his hands. Now his mouth joined Lint's hands. He knew he couldn't stop now. The confused girl continued to feel pleasure from Lint's actions. She wanted him to continue touching her body and push her even harder. The saint screamed with pleasure. She realized that she had reached her limit from the guy she was seeing for the first time. Lint continued to work on her forms. Lint and the saint made eye contact. They looked into each other's eyes with blushes on their faces. The saint asked the master tamer to tame her. Lint was surprised that she called him master. Lint asked the saint if she was sure that Lint would tame her. She answered positively and added that he would become her master after taming. Lint and the saint began to make mutual lip contact. Lint lay down on the saint's body. Their close contact began to flow into a more personal direction. The saint responded that she agreed to be tamed and asked Lint to start faster. They touched lips. Lint activated his ability, taming. The saint received an immense amount of pleasure from the effects of Lint's ability. The girl's contented face did not lose its blush for a second. She stuck out her tongue in pleasure and began to call out to Lint, calling him her master. Lint's actions caused the saint to salivate profusely. Lint and the saint's tongues began to mingle. The hero, addressing her by name, assured the girl that everything was fine. Lily replied that she was very happy that he called her by that name and that she loved him very much. Lint grabbed the girl's curves with all his strength. Lily moaned with pleasure and asked Lint to be a little faster. Balina's hand grabbed Lint's face. The blushing hero was very surprised by this turn of events. Lint's head and torso were covered in sweat. Balina quickly approached Lint's face. They both came to each other in embarrassment and touched lips. Lint was surprised by the adventurer's action. The girl grabbed Lint's head tightly. Their lips were still connected. Balina's body was covered in light sweat and a slight blush was visible on their faces. Lint tried to find out from her what had caused such agility on her part. In response, Balina laughed and said that she only watched calmly because Lint was busy taming the saint, but he was so rude that she could not control herself. Lint and Balina's tongues touched. Their faces were flushed. Lint thought he could satisfy the adventurer's desires. However, the hero was already at the limit of his capabilities. Lint pushed Balina onto her back and their lips touched again. Lint asked the girl to slow down the pace of their physical contact. Balina asked Lint if he was at his limit. Lily was lying under Balina, who was playfully looking at the satisfied girl. Lily had reached the peak of pleasure. Balina said that this was the last step. Lily screamed with pleasure. Saint Lily's face was flushed. Her tongue was outstretched and her expression conveyed the highest degree of her pleasure. Lily told the youth that she was now ready. Lint's face, embarrassed and sweaty, twisted. He began to tremble and through his trembling answered the saint that he was ready too. Lint released everything he had accumulated inside and finished what he had started. The hero held Saint Lily by the waist with both hands. He was at the limit of his capabilities. Lily received a gigantic dose of pleasure and screamed loudly. Their bodies were soaked with sweat. Balina watched the proceedings with inordinate interest. Lily was at the peak of pleasure, her body was sweating and her face was flushed. Lint thought that Lily was very tired. He noted that it was a good first time. Lint's face looked extremely devastated. Balina looked at the satisfied Lily with a smile and said that this was all for her. She added that now it was her turn to enjoy herself. Balina playfully and unexpectedly pushed Lint onto his back. Lint was confused and asked her to wait. Balina laughed loudly and replied that Lint was still young and could handle the lessons with her. Lint grabbed Balina's lush forms and pushed her onto her side. Balina's face showed that she was experiencing excessive pleasure from Lint's actions. She screamed with pleasure and added that she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Lily's plump form fell onto her back towards Lint. Balina's leg was on Lint's shoulder and he looked back in confusion. Lint didn't understand what was happening. Lint called out to Lily in surprise. He was embarrassed. Lily pressed her curvaceous forms to Lint's back and said resentfully that the master had already forgotten about her. She considered it unfair. Lily's face showed slight embarrassment. Lily began to run her nails over Lint's back. The hero was greatly surprised by this action from the saint. Lint experienced a strong surge of pleasure from Lily's action. Lily stubbornly reached out to Lint, their bodies covered in sweat. She asked the hero with a slight blush on her face how weak her master was. Lint looked at Lily in great embarrassment. He said that she acted very unexpectedly. Lint was lying on Balina, while Lily was actively working with his lower body. Balina was enjoying her time with Lint. The hero, very embarrassed, asked Lily to act more gently. Lily replied that Lint was reacting very nicely to this. Lint, Balina and Lily were lying contentedly on the bed. The hero, lying in the middle, was surrounded by girls on both sides. Balina hugged the boy's arm on the right and Lily lay quietly on the left. Balina said that she was finished. Lint replied that he was very tired. Lily said that the master was also incomparable. Balina perked up and turned to Lily. The adventurer asked the saint if she had enjoyed the day. Lily happily replied that she had enjoyed everything and already wanted to repeat it. Lint listened to the girls with embarrassment and said that his lower body was still itching. The saint leaned on the hero's shoulder and added that she would wait for Lint to recover. A satisfied Lint replied that he fully supported Lily's opinion. Balina looked at Lily coquettishly and asked her what she thought. The saint did not understand the adventurer's question at first, but then answered that she was ready. Lint listened to the words of his companions and did not understand what they were talking about. The saint looked at Lint and Balina and said with a smile that she had something to show them. Lint and the adventurer looked at Lily expectantly. Lily was ready to carry out her plan. Lily crossed her arms together and white feathers flew around the room. Beautiful angel feathers began to elegantly spread around the room. Lily's body began to glow. Angel wings formed on the saint's back. She soared into the air and glanced at the boys. Lily's wings spread out and she froze in midair. Lint looked at Lily's levitation in surprise. He told her it was incredible and compared her to a goddess who seemed to have descended from the sky. Balina watched Lily with interest. Balina leaned on Lint's shoulder and coquettishly said that it was natural, because thanks to Lint, even Kuruk became more than just a slime. Lint, embarrassed, doubted the adventurer's words. Balina turned to Lily with a smile and said that she had started doing this even before she became an angel. Lily proudly pressed her hand to herself and confirmed Balina's words, saying that she had been doing this even before the cursed duties of a saint. Lily said that anyone who could do the same as her had a level 5 magic skill. She was going to demonstrate everything in practice and pointed her hand to the side. A butterfly was flying near the lamplight. Lily turned to Balina. The adventurer quickly rushed to the moth and crushed it. Lint looked at what the girls were doing in surprise. Balina opened her hand. A crushed butterfly lay on it. Lint clarified that it could not be resurrected. Balina happily extended her hand with the moth towards Lily. Lily looked at the moth no less pleased. Lint looked at what they were doing in confusion. Lily pointed her hand at the dead butterfly and cast a healing spell. The insect began to glow. Immediately after Lily cast the spell, the butterfly quickly flew up. Lint was very surprised by this turn of events. He shouted that the butterfly had come back to life. Lily was pleased and boasted that normal healing magic was no match for her. She added that this was angel level, which meant she could do the impossible. The saint looked at Lint coquettishly and told him that she could resurrect him when he ran unconscious to his death. Her words scared the hell out of Lint. Lint was about to say something important with a serious face. He asked in a drawn-out voice what they were going to do. He said that he had finally met Lily and noticed that the saint's disappearance would cause a great stir. The three of them were lying on the bed. The girls were looking at Lint attentively. The hero was looking at the ceiling carefree. Lily agreed with Lint's words and added that they needed her and that she had come here with her dad. Lint looked at Lily and asked her if he understood correctly that she wanted to stop being a saint. The saint replied that the hero's suspicions were correct and that it was all just a decoration. Balina said that the easiest thing to do would be to simply say that the saint had died. Lint pointed out that she would lose her high rank if she did so. Lily said hopelessly that there was truth in Lint's words. Balina said that the system is inconvenient and only causes headaches. Lily added that after all she would start from F rank. The adventurer replied that if she had time, then will be able to rise to S+ rank. They discussed with displeasure. Lint watched their conversation with confusion. Lint angrily asked if it was possible to leave this rank. Lint smilingly suggested that they grab Dad and hand him over to Harem, thereby freeing Lily. Lily was surprised by such a proposal, and Balina listened to the hero's words with boredom. Balina happily shouted that Lint was a real genius. Lint was surprised by her words. Lily thought about it and said that Harem would not agree to this. She added that of course she wanted to kill her dad, but he did not intend to let her go. Balina was very angry because of so many problems. The adventurer in anger decisively suggested to kill them both. Lint said with annoyance that Balina's ideas were of course good. Lily interrupted angrily and said that then there would be no one to govern the country. Balina snorted angrily. Lily slyly suggested that if this headache fell on others, it would be much easier. She added that this needed to be thought about. Balina said impatiently that there was nothing to think about since only Lint could handle it. Lily gasped in bewilderment, and the young man asked sadly how he would govern the country. Lily happily supported Balina's words, saying that it could be a great idea and decided that it would be a good idea for Lint to rule the country. Lint was very surprised by the saint's words. Balina cheerfully declared that she had an idea. Balina pointed at Lily and said that she was God's messenger. Lily looked at the adventurer in bewilderment and asked why it was always so sudden. Balina spread her hands happily and said that Lily could put him on the post. She asked the guys what they thought of her idea. Lint was stunned by Balina's approach to such a matter. Balina playfully put her hands on Lint's shoulder and said that if they did this, they would have a country above the believers under their control, and they would be gods to them. Lint, confused, asked Balina to wait and said that it would not be that easy. Lily thoughtfully said that it might be a good idea. Her words scared Lint. She added that this way she could be free and holy and they could catch the coup. Her words drove Lint crazy. The girls joined hands and looked at Lint with admiration. They told the hero to get ready. Lint was very confused by the words of his subordinates. Lint twirled his hands and said that he could not believe that he would become the ruler of the country. He added that he was an ordinary adventurer. Balina and Lily looked at the young man happily. Adventurer said that everything was fine. Lily cheerfully added that she and Balina would be his assistants in governing the country. Lint was completely confused. He did not understand what was happening. Both girls began to talk with a smile. The adventurer and Lily lay down on the bed and simultaneously declared that they wanted to be Lint's partners. Lily and Balina quickly dragged Lint to their place. Lint sheepishly refused, saying that he wanted to sleep. He suggested continuing tomorrow. Both girls provoked the young man to action, adding that he should not worry because they themselves would take care of everything. Some time has passed. Night, a luxurious mansion from which screams and rumbles are heard. Inside, they are shouting about protecting Dad. Light Balina screams and swings her hand, furiously preparing to strike. She is in a very fighting mood. She zips through the gun-toting guards, sending them flying with one blow and doesn't even have to stop. Balina spares no one in her path. After punching more people, she swings her leg and hits one guard with iron greaves. Almost all the guards are already lying on the ground unconscious. Lint watches this from behind a bush and sighs. They are there with Saint Lily. Lint said that he only blinked and she already knocked out 5 people. He even sympathizes with the guards to some extent. Lily sighs angrily and tells Balina to calm down because she is getting tired. Lint remembered and immediately asked Lily if Baron was here. The girl agreed and said that they were not together, continuing to watch Balina's actions. Then she looked at Lint with a smile and told him that Baron doesn't like expensive hotels and that Dad is wary of his powers. The guy asked if he doesn't believe in his allies. Lily looked away, thought for a moment, and said seriously that she assumed that the Baron had surrendered to his father. Lint was surprised and noted that in that case. Lily interrupted him and said instead that the Baron could be connected with the Cardinal. The hero realized and said that it meant that the coup had been carried out at the Baron's behest, and then wondered what that meant to him. Lily said that it meant where he had run off to. At that moment, Balina knocked out another soldier and she was rudely called out from the side, causing her to turn around. In front of her stood 2 huge knights in metal armor. They reproached her for not respecting the people living here, so they, the Dragon Knights, would give her damage. Lint was very surprised, excitedly shouting that it was the Dragon Knights when he heard it. He was dumbfounded that the Baron had gotten into a rush. Saint Lily laughed with a reassuring smile and said that they would not defeat their rebel. Immediately after Lily's words, Balina's fist met the Dragon Knight's helmet, which bent, and the knight himself flew back, crying out in pain. His flight was stopped by another knight, who also fell with a loud crash. The third Dragon Knight raised his weapon to readiness and began to run towards Balina, screaming. The girl sped up and running past him, punched another Dragon Knight, who turned around and flew off to the side with a cry of pain. Lint felt their pain just by watching this and the screams did not stop. And Saint Lily said that since the guy heard about them, he knew that they only had B ranks, which meant that to Balina they were bugs. Lint sighed and said that in any case the Pope was somehow sealed too tightly. He wondered if the Cardinal had planned this. At this point, Balina had dealt with all the Dragon Knights who were lying unconscious in a heap. She turned around and said with a smile that she was done. Lint and Saint Lily came out from behind the bush, and the boy praised Balina, saying that it was a great job, and then was surprised at how bright it was. Balina shook her hands and was glad of the light, saying that more was not needed for such a victory. And then she waved her hand to Lily and said that this was only possible thanks to their healer, so she had hopes for the girl further. Lily sighed sheepishly and agreed. The group of heroes ran on. Lint said that it was time for them to go in and meet their dad. Balina asked to let her do it. Lint suddenly remembered that this was a posh hotel, at least it looked like one. Lily agreed and pointed out that such hotels had a lot of barriers. Then she smiled, looked at Lint and said that she thought she knew where Dad was sitting. Lint asked her, confused, which room he was sitting in. The girl happily replied that, of course, the best one. Balina noted that he was not the smartest. At that moment, Lint noticed something flying past his hair and knocking down a tree behind him. And then a man in a cloak appeared with 3 knives on his belt and one in his hands right next to him, and a crash was heard. The tamed spirit of Kajero suddenly appeared and stopped the blade with its fangs right in front of Lint's neck. After parrying the attack, the attacking man jumped back sharply before Kajero's spirit could attack him. The girls noticed but did not have time to react, so they looked at Lint with excitement. The guy tensed up and shouted out who this person was, not missing the chance to quarrel. The attacker landed after bouncing on the ground a few meters away from the hero. And then he immediately took out a spare blade from the sheath on his belt and stood in a defensive stance. Kajero watched the actions carefully, and then everyone realized that this man was the Pope's guard. Lily shouted to Lint that she knew him. Lint clarified that she meant the enemy looking at her. The girl looked at the hero strangely and nodding said that this was Dad's assassin named Sage. Balina smiled and replied that he was quieter than grass, clenching his fist and not taking his eyes off Sage. Lint wondered if his companions were very worried, but was Sage really that strong an assassin? Balina smiled and told him to tame it. Lint was very confused, turned around, and asked again to make sure he heard correctly. Saint Lily also happily said that she supported the idea because it would be great practice. Lint couldn't believe that they were actually suggesting this to him. The girls encouraged the boy with smiles. Balina hurried him and Lily wished him luck. Lint said angrily and embarrassedly that they would collect his bones themselves later. Saint Lily replied with a carefree smile that if it was just a couple of bones, she would heal them. And Balina continued to encourage him, telling him to believe in himself and then he would succeed. Lint looked at them with a betrayed look, thinking that these two would send him to the grave, and also wondered what would be abnormal for them. Assassin Sage laughed and asked what kind of trash it was, tossing his knife from one hand to the other. He then ran forward as fast as he could and shouted that he was talking to Lint, displeased that they were having such a carefree conversation. Assassin Sage began to attack Lint, not giving him a second to counterattack, while Kajero helped fight back. Lint retreated further and further under the pressure of attacks and Sage quickly delivered new blows. Lint could only defend himself. A few seconds later, Sage noticed the moment to attack and threw 3 daggers from his belt straight at the hero. Kajero quickly caught the blades with his teeth and broke them into pieces, while Lint tried to catch his breath a little. After that, he was able to pull away and begin maneuvering with the blade in his hands, fire burning around his body due to the fusion with Kajero. The hero then lunged forward and began to counterattack with a shout, this time landing a furious number of blows of his own. While the assassin Sage was fighting back, Kiryuk appeared, rushing towards him with a smile and delivering a blow to his head, jumping back behind him. However, this did not cause any damage to Sage, so he stood in a stance and waited for Lint to act. The boy wiped his face with his hand, resting and not taking his eyes off his opponent. He thought that this wasn't so bad. He was grateful to Kiryuk, calling him the best defender in the world, but he knew that his attacks didn't work either. And if he couldn't cope without help, he would remain a nobody. Lint gritted his teeth and thought that this shouldn't be the case, because after this they would be facing an even more difficult enemy, namely the Baron. So he couldn't give up. The guy remembered the faces of Balina and Lily with happy smiles, who believed in him and supported him. Therefore, he, as their master, had no right to fall flat on his face. This only worsened the guy's situation because he had a burden of responsibility. Sage stepped forward and asked why they were pursuing his excellency. Lint was surprised by this question and then shouted angrily that he would answer a question with a question. He asked why the assassin was protecting him. Sage was surprised by such a question, and then he answered that he didn't know it was because God commanded it. He was serious. Then he spread his arms and began to explain that he wanted to live for God and die for his glory. This is the task of all mankind, and God came to them in the form of the Pope. Then he got back into a fighting stance and said that the God needed him to protect him, so he had nothing more to say. Lint realized that this was bad because he had no time to talk. Kajero was ready to attack. The guy told him that he agreed and added that he no longer attacks as he wants, and from now on they will do everything according to his plan. After which he gave the order to focus on the attack. Kajero nodded in agreement. The tamed spirit approached the boy's face from behind and they looked at each other. Lint replied that it was true, Kiryuk would remain behind as would Lily. After which the guy shouted that it was time for them to begin. Assassin Sage began to rush from one side to the other, gradually approaching the hero. Lint parried the assassin's sudden attack with clenched teeth, then clenched his other hand and began to cast a spell. Assassin Sage was very surprised when he saw the fireball spell. However, unfortunately, he managed to dodge the spell by moving his body to the side. Lint continued to rush forward and cast the spell while shouting. Sage noticed that the guy had changed his strategy and noted that it was getting hot, after which he threw his hand back and used a spell. He shouted that this is how magic should be used, calling Lint a baby. A huge fireball appeared behind the assassin Sage, which he sent flying towards Lint a moment later. However, the hero stood there motionless, not even taking a defensive pose. Sage was very surprised at why he did not defend himself, not realizing the complete stupidity. Lint smiled just before the fireball hit, which caused a huge explosion after the collision. Balina and Lily shuddered, looking excitedly at the explosion that did not subside. They also did not understand anything. At this moment, Kiryuk took the opportunity and attacked the assassin Sage from behind, knocking him to the ground. He said that he did not believe that he had turned into those 4. And just a moment before falling, he managed to put his foot out and land over Lint's burnt body lying on the ground. Kiryuk looked at him, but the assassin Sage jumped off the ground and disappeared in an instant, deciding to leave. Saint Lily and Balina called out to their master in fear and excitement, starting to run up to him. They lifted the injured Lint, and Balina said that his eyes were leaking out. Lily assured that everything was fine and she could cure him. Until then, she asked the adventurer to cover them. Balina replied that she understood and went to the entrance. After some time, Lint woke up, opening his eyes and mouth. He was lying on something soft. Saint Lily and Balina appeared above him. They asked if the guy was awake and sighed with relief, smiling because they were worried. Lint asked them where they were now. The guy was lying on a luxurious bed, and the girls were sitting next to him and taking care of him. Balina answered that they were in the best room of the hotel. The boy suddenly jumped up and asked what happened to the assassin and where he was now. Lily smiled, and Balina answered that he shouldn't worry because he escaped. Lint put his hand on his forehead and said in disappointment that he still couldn't win, so it looks like he'll have to continue to rely on them. Saint Lily was glad and smiled that, although he believed in himself, he still trusted her healing power. Lint was embarrassed and scratched the back of his head with his hand, nodding in agreement and saying that everything really was like that. And then he asked the saint if all the girls in her state were so amazing. Lily answered that not all of them were so strong, but there was a circle of those chosen by the Pope. The guy thought about what would happen next if it was so difficult now. He decided that there would be many more problems ahead, after which Lint came to his senses and asked what had happened to Dad if he was in his bed right now. Balina looked into the corner of the room and answered that he was lying there. In the corner of the room, there was a tied bag that was shaking and making sounds. And then a head appeared from inside and Dad started coughing, clearly being inside with a lack of air. He looked at Saint Lily, Lint, and Balina and then asked who they were, threatening that he was the Pope. The heroes looked at him without a trace of concern. Lint was surprised that the man was cursing and threatening so much, and so he asked if the man was really a saint. Lily sheepishly confirmed that he was. The Pope continued to shake his head angrily, trying to get out of the bag, and continued to shout that he should be released as quickly as possible, and then they should wait for their punishment. Balina noted that he had sex with many girls at once here, so little could be expected from him. Lint closed his eyes, grinned, and said that he was only a saint in name after hearing this story. Saint Lily got up from her bed and came up to him. The Pope immediately recognized the girl and shuddered, greatly surprised. After which he began to laugh awkwardly and tell the girl to stop, calling this situation her joke. He said that Lily had already played enough. The girl looked down at the Pope angrily and said that she was there because of his negligence. The Pope began to laugh awkwardly and stupidly, saying that he was simply fulfilling his direct duties and that the Sacred Virgin had gone crazy, in his opinion. Immediately after these words, there was a roar and dust. After it cleared, the Pope could be seen lying on the ground in his sack, having lost consciousness for a while. Saint Lily sighed and said that Balina had overdone it. She, in her defense, replied that she had simply covered his mouth slightly. The Pope stood up, looking at them angrily. And then he began to shout with the results of the blow on his face that she dared to hit him, calling herself God's conductor, therefore they must kneel. Balina slapped him again, yelling at him to put his tongue back in his mouth, causing the man to fly back a little. Lint looked at the man with a puzzled expression, saying that he didn't even realize how hard she had hit him. Balina, in turn, politely asked Lily for help. Saint Lily sighed, replied that she would have to help, and then closed her eyes and used the holy power of healing. The wounds on the Pope's face healed, and Balina shouted at him with a smile to get up. The man was very scared when he saw her nearby. Then Lint came forward and asked for forgiveness for everything, and said that now he would definitely live. Balina happily took the bag and pulled it towards the exit, saying that she would now send him back to his holy kingdom. The man silently dragged himself after her. Saint Lily stopped her friend, telling her to stop so that she could go to the Baron first. The man started shouting again that he was here, clarifying that he meant the Baron of the Dragon Kingdom, so he offered to go to him so that he could show them. Balina nodded understandingly to Lily and hit the Pope on the neck, knocking him unconscious. Lily brought her finger to her face, thought for a moment, and said that in any case, they needed to hide it somewhere. After some time, they tied the bag as tightly as possible and laid it on the dragon Gil's back. Balina asked if they were flying to Violento. Having secured it more securely, she reported that everything was ready. Lint turned to the saint and said with a smile that he would just sit quietly with him. Lily agreed to show her face to the guild for the first time in a long time. Lint and Balina climbed onto the dragon, and the boy asked Gil to take them to the capital. The dragon shouted, indicating its readiness to leave. Saint Lily spread her angel wings and with a reassuring smile said that she would fly herself. Some time passed, the heroes were already flying in the sky. Saint Lily was very happy and said that she really wanted to try to fly one day. Balina noted that she was incredible and very much like an angel. They flew over the forest and mountains, heading to the capital to the head of the Violento Guild, continuing their communication. At this time, another monster was killed in the forest by a man in armor with a huge axe. The man turned around and lifted the visor of his helmet, listening to someone tell him that he should just run away. The man in armor addressed him as Sage. It was the assassin who had attacked the heroes. He reported that Dad had been kidnapped and also asked for forgiveness. The assassin was kneeling with his head down. The man in armor thought about how someone could defeat an assassin. Then he angrily asked who that person was. Assassin Sage raised his head, looking at the person in front of him, saying that the person was with the sacred maiden. The man in armor glanced at the assassin and said he understood, so Sage could go. The assassin addressed the man as Baron. The past is some amount of time, the capital city. The market is filled with a huge number of people. Lint asked if it was true that Bylina and Lily were so famous. They were walking down this street. The guy asked about the need for their disguise. The girls used capes on their heads to hide. Bylina answered that it was just in case because they didn't want any extra problems. Lint noted that with ears like Bylina's, which peeked out from under her cloak and gave her away as a cat, there wasn't much point in disguise. The girl smiled and asked what he meant because she really liked the hood and it made it much easier for her to walk. She asked Lint if it was bad. Bylina also noticed that the guy's new robe fit him well. The guy smiled sheepishly, asking if it was true. The girl confirmed it. Lint looked at his robe and said that he didn't expect to be able to get it. Guildmaster Violento said that just by wearing it, Lint could become stronger. Lily guessed that Violento had a lot of such things, and the guy said that he had to live up to expectations. Bylina mentioned Violento. She reminded him that he cried when he saw Lily's face. She thought it was funny. Lint and Lily smiled. Lint thought about how Bylina, Lily, and Violento were like a family until he came along, seeing their relationship with each other when they met. The boy said with a smile that he thought he was worried about them all. Lily laughed and said she would agree with that. Lint, in turn, remembered that it was funny to see his face when they unexpectedly brought in a crying pope. Lily said that it was not funny anymore. Bylina lifted the bag of gold coins with a smile, suggesting that they let go of the memories of Violento and go shopping. Lint shouted at her not to talk about it for so long, and wasn't she planning to spend too much at once? Lily laughed. The heroes entered a restaurant together, where there were many guests, discussing at their tables and eating together. Lint, Bylina, and Lily ordered a lot of food for themselves and began to talk about the Baron of the Dragon Kingdom. Lint asked if he was really strong or she was. He wasn't sure, but he heard that this person was S rank. The guy thought that they needed more information before the battle. Bylina laughed, pleased with the food she had ordered as she had already held a bone without meat, and said that Lint was ready. The guy replied that he was always ready. Saint Lily thought about the Baron, trying to remember something about this man, and said that they would act according to the situation. She began to tell that this man's weapon was a large axe, specifying that it was even gigantic. And she also said that from what she heard, the Baron of the Dragon Kingdom defeated the royal dragon with one blow. And Lily clarified that this dragon was the strongest of all. After the victory, Baron said that he was the commander of the Dragon Knights, so he must submit to his will. The dragon began to resist, and in its dying state began to use fire breathing. The Baron of the Dragon Kingdom swung his axe and began to attack, saying that it was his choice. Fiery breath began to emerge from each of the dragon's heads, but the Baron's magical armor provided excellent protection. The dragon with many heads and 3 brags, although it hit, did not cause any damage due to this, despite the huge explosion. Since the magic armor could protect even from the dragon's attack, the Baron continued moving towards the dragon through his breaths. This was one of the special features of the Dragon Kingdom Baron. She jumped with her giant axe straight at the dragon. The armored woman strikes straight at the dragon's head. The woman tightens her grip on the axe and swings her weapon again. She is about to strike the dragon's head again. The armored woman raises an axe above her head and turns around, striking the monster. The dragon heads rush towards the armored woman at great speed, but are caught by flames that engulf them. The warrior defeated the dragon, surprising Lind. When he came to his senses, he fearfully asked the girl in the hood if it was true that he was about to fight a dangerous battle. She reassured him, asking him to remain optimistic. The girl looks at the boy condescendingly, and then she turns to Bylina and reminds them that their chance of winning is 70%. She asks if Bylina agrees with her. Bylina nods her head. Lind gets up from his seat and asks what all this means. He can't believe that their chance of winning is so great. He wonders if the girl really believes in herself that much. Bylina folded her arms across her chest and began listing names. She was thinking about who could join their party to increase their chances of winning. Then the girl shouts out that Lind will most likely not survive the battle. The guy at this point becomes very tense. Lind hugs Kiryuk and complains about how they are being forced to risk their lives. At this point, Bylina raises her index finger and says that there is a huge chance that Kiryuk will survive. Lind doubts. The girl rejoices, claiming that the monster will attack Kajero because Gil can fly and is equal to him. Bylina turns to Linda and says that's why she thought their chance of winning was 70. She convinces the guy that he can't survive. Lind grabs his head and asks if it's okay to say something like that. Bylina gets up from her seat and says that to prevent this from happening, they will train. She convinces Lind that if he becomes stronger, he will be able to survive. Lind becomes gloomy and says that this is a complete nightmare. The girl in the hood says that this is exactly why she took several tasks from Violento. The girl hands over the task sheets and says that they are all B rank, but they can easily promote the adventurer to A rank. Lind blushes and thinks about his partner's words about improvement. But first, the squad decides to go into a store. When they enter, they are immediately met by a salesman who greets them loudly. The man immediately recognizes Balina and the Holy Virgin. Lily takes off her hood. She asks if they are bothering the shopkeeper by coming unannounced. The shopkeeper smiles and says that it is no big deal. The man then looks behind Balina and looks at Linda. He asks who the guy is. Suddenly he remembers that he has seen this guy before. He recognizes him and his eyes widen in surprise. Lind smiles sheepishly when the salesman asks if he really is a dragon tamer. The guy tries to remember if they have met. The salesman folds his arms and apologizes for his rudeness. He introduces himself and says that he is a salesman at a gun store. The man smiles admiringly and says that he is desperate to see what Lind is capable of. He claims that he is glad to meet him. Lind spreads his arms wide and says he needs a new weapon for the mission. He needed a weapon in particular. The man leans over and says it's an honor to equip a dragon tamer with a weapon. The salesman asks if the squad really has no money limit. He then says he understands and offers to come in and look at the weapons. The man turns around and asks if Lind would like to use a light one-handed weapon. He remembered that Lind liked to work with him. The boy confirms the man's words. Balina appears behind Lind and asks the salesman to bring the best they have in the store so that the weapon can be proud of. The salesman leans over and smiles. He asks the customers to wait a while so they can see what they can't even imagine. He says he will provide an absolutely arsenal. The man leaves and the squad has to wait for him for a while. A few minutes later, the seller returns with a gun in his hands and apologizes for making his customers wait. Lind examines the weapons: a light sword, Alexander's heavy sword, a bow of 3 bows, and a self-defense dagger. The seller praises the quality of each item. Balina points to the weapon and offers to buy it. The guy claims that the weapon is very big, so he will not be able to carry it. Balina turns around and convinces Lind that they have bags so they can carry so many large weapons. The guy frowns and says that's not the case at all. Lind decides to buy all the weapons in the store. The seller promises to bring more and accept returns if something doesn't fit. The seller is happy with the purchase, hoping to sell the returned weapon for more thanks to Lind's fame. Lind grows gloomy and says that the salesman has settled in well. It seems to him that the man looks like an aristocrat. The salesman raises his hand and laughs. He says that people like him can only live by business. Balina offers to exchange swords for the blessing of one weapon. The seller is happy and thanks the customers. The man takes an abacus and starts counting. He says that their store will track their guns for 5 years after purchase. Balina pays the money. The seller invites her to come back for more shopping. Lind is interested in buying an item that will save her from fishing. Lind examines an item in the display case. The salesman turns to the guy and tries to say something, but Lind interrupts him and asks if the item is a weapon. The seller replies that it is indeed a weapon. He asks if the guy wants to look at it. The guy agrees and says that he is just curious. The man takes a weapon out of the display case and tells him that the weapon was created by Alan, the greatest blacksmith. The guy looks at the seller questioningly. The seller says that the weapon is unfinished, so it is difficult to evaluate its effectiveness. The man comes down and holds the gun up to the guy. He claims that it's just there for show. Their store didn't plan on selling the gun. The guy agrees with the man and says that the gun looks like a sword handle. The guy picks up the gun and examines it. Linda finds it strange that the gun fits his hand well. Bylan approaches the boy and asks what Lind thinks of the weapon. Lind says he doesn't know. He says the handle has no weight at all and can't do much damage, so it didn't look like a weapon. Lily comes over and also examines the weapon. She thinks about it and asks if this item could be a magical weapon. The seller says that it is unlikely, since the existence of magical weapons has not been proven. The man says he analyzed the weapon. During the analysis, he learned that it contained many rare materials. He claims that if the weapon had been finished, it would have been beautiful. The seller is sure that no one will be able to finish the weapon. He believes that Master Allen was very upset about something. Lind tensely examines the sword's hilt while listening to the man. The squad left the store closer to evening. Lind and his partners walked through the forest. In the end, Lind still took the hilt from the sword, which was not finished. The guy was able to persuade the man to sell him the weapon, even though he didn't want to. Then the guy looks around and thinks that the most important question is where they are now. The guy gets scared when he notices some huge monster in front of him. Bylan calls the giant Hercules, a B-rank monster that resembles a small dragon. Lind confirms her words, recalling traps for such creatures. Lily approaches Linda and says that they are training now. She raises her hand, makes a fist, and says that it is time for them to fight. Linda tenses up and asks if the girl really wants to fight the monster now. Lily says that the assignment says that the giant can't be seriously injured. She reads on and says that the clients would like to see him alive. The guy starts to worry. He knew that the monster was B rank, so he had no reason to be afraid, especially since winning without much effort would give him a rank. Lily smiles and says that Violento is a good cook who always prepares a delicious dinner. The guy still hesitates. He reminds her that he is a C rank. Then the guy finally decides to act. He moves forward and prepares for battle. Lind looked at the monster with determination and thought that he would be able to deal some damage to the monster. He also thought that with Kagero's power, he would be able to deal more damage. Balina advises Lind to summon Kagero freely, not as an assistant. Lind is perplexed but agrees to try. The guy summons Kagero. A huge wolf appears right in front of him. The wolf immediately approaches his master and cuddles. The boy smiles and strokes the wolf's head. He says that everything is fine and that Kagero has a job. Kagero starts to howl. The monster immediately turns towards the sound of the wolf's howl and heads towards its opponents. Lind mounts Kagero and gives him the command to move forward. Kagero growled as the huge monster moved towards him. The wolf and the monster collided. Kagero grabbed the monster by the torso and threw it aside. The monster fell to the ground with a thud, landing near Lind. Lind covered his head with his hands and looked at the monster that had fallen right in front of him in shock. He shouted to Kagero that he was incredible. Lind approaches the wolf and strokes his head. It seems to him that his summoned pet is now invincible. He is confident that with Kagero, it will be easier for him to achieve their goals. After he started practicing with Kagero, his own strength became much stronger. He wondered if that meant he was very weak before. Balina approaches Lind and asks if the guy noticed. The guy turns and looks questioningly at the girl. Balina smiles and says that they can finish training now. The guy darkens and asks if the girl is really telling the truth. He asks what will happen to his progress. When Balina starts teasing Linda again, Lily comes up to them. The guy immediately turns around and looks at her. Balina winks and reminds that trust is very important. She claims that there should be as much trust as possible. Lind rubs the back of his head and blushes. He asks if it's true. The guy says he's trying. And then he finally decides to do it and asks how it's possible to do it. Lily blushes and looks away. She says that something is bothering her. She then asks how Lind is feeling after the merger. The boy raises his head and thinks. He answers that with Kagero he defends himself obviously better. He also feels that his physical abilities are growing. Lily closes her eyes and then smiles and says that her master thinks of Kagero as armor. Lind pets Kagero and says that this is not true at all. Lind then turns back to the wolf and repeats that the girl is wrong. Lind looks closely into Kagero's eyes and asserts that even though he is a spirit, he is still a friend and a member of the team. Lily smiles and explains that the fusion may not work well if Lind does not fully trust the spirit. Lind hugs Kagero, who sticks out his tongue and wags his tail happily. The guy agrees with the girl, turns to Kagero and says that he and Kagero should try again. After some time, Lind notices that a monster was moving towards them again, which was already ready to attack them. Lind places his hand on his chest and calls upon the spirit. Kagero appears behind Lind, but Kiryuk suddenly arrives and attacks the monster with weak blows, ignoring his master's orders. Balina approaches Lind and asks him not to worry. She explains that the monster only reacts to those who are stronger than him. The guy asks what that means. Lind turns to the girl and asks what will happen if the monster does not react to him. Balina says that the guy has her and Lily for this. She tells him that he did not notice them because they were hiding. The girl points her hand at Lind and says that if he tries, they will all come for them. Kiryuk stopped attacking and flew to Lily, breathing a sigh of relief. Having received praise and the promise of a massage, he was delighted. Lily strokes Kiryuk's head and turns to Lind, telling him that he must trust his spirit. She claims that this is the only way they can become one and not get in each other's way like a crab and a swan. Lind turns back to Kagero and says they need to try again. The guy starts interacting with the spirit again. At this moment, Lind thinks that he hesitated for a very long time. But at that moment, he believed in Kagero. Together with Kagero, they begin to scream and growl loudly. Linda summons fire, commanding Kagero. The monsters run towards them. Balina is happy about this turn of events. The monsters accelerated and were about to strike Lind, who was standing in the center. Lind screamed and began to attack along with Kagero. Lily and Balina look at their comrades in shock and shout at them, asking what they are doing. Balina shouts at Linda that they should act not like that, but in a completely different way. Balina and Lily tried to stop the master, but it was too late, as Lind had already attacked one of the monsters. After Linda and the huge monster collided, there was an explosion and a bright flash. After some time, the flame died down. Waking up on the ground, Lind hears the unusual voice of Lily calling him. The guy raises his hand and places it on some object that had been blocking his view all this time. Lind lets out a confused cry when he realizes he's lying on Lily's lap. She calms him down and asks him not to move. Lind raises his head and asks the girl where they are. Lily replies that after the battle they moved and set up a tent in which they decided to take shelter. She tells him that she bought this tent a day ago. Lind begins to remember that he lost his mind during the battle the day before and damaged his nervous system even more than his body. He asks if Lily is treating him. Lily confirms that she has taken up his treatment. At this time, Balina approached the tent. She went inside and asked if any of her partners wanted to eat meat. The guy gets up and immediately recognizes his partner. The girl smiles and hands Linda the meat. She says that the guy must have been very hungry after all this time. Having tasted the meat, Lind is delighted with its taste, and upon learning that he found it himself, he spits out the piece. Balina says that this monster was defeated by another monster. She claims that the morning was very eventful. Balina chews meat and looks at Lind. She asks if the guy remembers anything about yesterday. The boy puts his hand to his head and tries to remember something. He blushes and says that he remembers teaming up with Kajero. After that, he could no longer control it. Lind reaches out his hand to the spirits and they immediately move closer to him. The boy strokes the creatures and laughs. He apologizes for making them worry about him. Lily looks at the guy with a smile and says that this is also a kind of progress in training. The guy puts his hand to his chin and thinks. He finally agrees that the girl is right. He thought that this would allow him to become stronger. Balina laughs again and says that if the guy continues to mope, he will give her his powers faster. Lind is indignant, asking how this is possible. He calms down and asks more seriously if this is true. Balina smiles and confirms that this is true. The girl mentions that Kiryuk also defeated one Hercules. Lind screams again and asks how he could defeat Hercules with a spirit. He just couldn't believe it. Lind looks at the spirit and asks when he became so strong. Kiryuk takes out his sword and starts swinging it. Lind looks at the creature in shock and asks what it means. He wonders where the spirit got the sword from. Lind picks up the spirit and examines it carefully. He turns to Lily and asks if this is the training she was talking about. Lily raises her hand and says that it is normal. She claims that Kiryuk is helping too. Lily also mentions Balina's horns and her wings. She talks about how if her master becomes stronger, they too gain strength and also become more feminine. She claims that this is evolution. Lind looks at Kiryuk in confusion, then picks him up and asks if he can really do anything. Kiryuk makes a noise. Lind hums questioningly and asks what the creature is trying to say. Lind asks if Kiryuk wants to train. The creature raises its arms and cries out in joy. Adventurers in the forest, Balina draws on the ground, sings. Lily brings tea, finds out the score of the battle. Lind 87 victories, Kiryuk 98 points. Lily praises the master, passing the tea to Balina, who agrees, mentioning her 16 defeats. Balina turns her gaze to the fighting Kiryuk and Lind. She said that they had been fighting for a very long time, but she had no doubt that Kiryuk was becoming stronger. Lind swung his sword and moved towards Kiryuk. He struck the spirit, but Kiryuk blocked it and then decided to fly away. Lind attacked Kiryuk, missed, retreated, rushed forward again, but he flew up and quickly fell from above. Lind blocked the blow, fell, dodged the new attack, grabbed Kiryuk's sword left in the ground. The boy repeatedly pulls out different weapons and tries to attack Kiryuk. The sound of steel and screams can be heard. The forest is getting lighter. Lind is lying on the ground, breathing heavily. He was trying to recover from the battle with Kiryuk. Lily approaches her comrades and says that they did a good job. She asks them not to move as she wants to heal. Lind gets up and thanks the girl. Kiryuk sits on the ground and makes strange sounds. Lily finishes the treatment and raises her palms up. She reports that everything is ready. Kajero stuck out his tongue. Lind blushed and smiled, saying that he felt much better now. Kiryuk smiled too. After finishing the duel, Lind praised the balance and power of the sword he had used for a long time. The guy swings the weapon and says it was easy to use. He felt like he could move even faster. Balina looks at the weapon with admiration and says that it is not called a yataghan for nothing. Lind puts the weapon on the ground and is glad that he is big and looks like he can handle anyone with one swing. True, he was heavy for Lind, but the guy thought that he could handle him with the help of Kajero. Lily approved of the choice of sword, believing that good equipment was important. Lind wondered if the sword would cope with the axe. Confident Balina and playful Lily lift the mood, but Lind is sad, considering their attitude too frivolous. The boy thinks again and turns his gaze to the sword. Balina comes up to Lind and stands behind him. Lind takes out the sword handle and asks if it looks like a magic sword. He says that he still hasn't figured out how to use it. Lind demonstrates the ability to release Kagero's flames from his hand, admitting that it is dangerous and attracts the attention of enemies. Lily picks up the handle and looks at it. She says they need to know more about this. Suddenly, flowers appear from the hilt. Lind gapes in surprise and looks at the hilt in shock. Lily laughs and says that this is a healing sword that can be used to restore life. Lind is surprised to see flowers on a dead tree, calling it amazing. A joyful Bylina supports his enthusiasm. Lind, standing before the monster, urges Kagero to give it his all, knowing that this battle will test all his efforts. Lind with a sword and Kagero attack the monster, rushing towards each other with shouts. The boy struck the monster. Lind smiles and rejoices that he was able to intercept the power of Hercules. The boy gives Kagero a command and the wolf begins to act, strengthening the body of his master. Lind punches the monster with all his might, making rumbling sounds. Lind then swings his sword, shouting a battle cry, and delivers a powerful blow straight to the monster's belly. The monster makes its last sounds and falls to the ground, raising dust. Lind picks up his sword and breathes a sigh of relief. He is glad that he and Kagero managed to cope. Bylina raises her hands and rejoices that the boy managed to defeat the monster. Lily also rejoices at the master's victory and says that it was amazing. Kiryuk is next to them, making joyful sounds. Bylina runs up to the guy and hugs him. She congratulates the guy and says that he was able to reach A rank. Lind is embarrassed and asks if this is true. Lind and his partners look at the defeated monster. He says that he was finally able to defeat an A rank monster. He suggests that one wound to the stomach will be enough to defeat his enemy. Lily recalls that many people say that the giant Hercules is a pass to the world of an A-rank traveler. Lind is surprised by this. Lily becomes more serious and tells about the giant Hercules' thick armor and powerful strength, and above all, the fear he instills in his opponent. The girl claims that only an A-rank person can stand up to him. Lind says that now he understands why he is going through this quest. Lily says that the guy tried hard. Bylina raises her fist and screams with joy. She suggests finishing the quests and moving up to S-rank. Lind laughs anxiously and says that S-rank is too much. The boy puts his hand on the bag that was hanging from his belt and says that he is still surprised that the giant fit in it. He notes that magic bags are wonderful. Lind points forward and suggests that everyone else call guild to move on to the next quest. He says that they don't have much time left before the fight with the Baroness. Bylina raises her hand and mentions that she already shared the news with Lily. Lily smiles and asks why they don't go to Framel. Lind asks why they have to go to Framel, to his hometown. The guy suddenly remembers the Book of Stars and asks if that's why the girl wants to go to Framel. Bylina says that's one of the reasons. But that's not all. Lily puts her hand to her face and says that in the future, Linda should have his own base of operations in order to rest. The girls come up to the guy and cuddle up to him. Lind blushes when Lily says that they will wash in the same bath, and Bylina says that they will need a large bed for 2 people. Lily smiles and looks at the guy slyly. Bylina blushes and runs her tongue over the guy's face. Lind blushes and smiles. He says that he really needs a base of operations. The little lizard-like monsters heard a strange sound and immediately raised their heads up. They saw something terrible, so they ran to hide in a hollow tree. At that moment, a huge dragon flew over the trees. Heading to Framel, the squad looks forward to visiting Lind's home, despite its modesty and ruins. The entire squad approaches the destroyed house. The girls stop and open their eyes wide in surprise. Bylina asks if this is really their master's house. Lily laughs and says that Lind had a wild life. Lind blushes and says that's why he didn't want to take them to his house, especially since he already told them about it. Lind folds his arms and looks away. He says that this house was enough to get him through the rains. He says that he didn't live in the best conditions, considering that he was a tamer. Bylina noted the distance of the house from the settlements. Lind explained this as additional protection from persecution. Lily comes closer to the house and asks if the boy has any memories of his family. Lind waves his hand and says that he has been pretending to be an adventurer for as long as he can remember. Lind smiles at Kiryuk's words, recognizing the spirit as a family member with whom he has gone through various trials. They also shared the meat they bought with the little money they earned. On cold nights, the boy relied on Kiryuk's fluffiness. Lind claims that even so, this house was the only place where his heart could rest. Bylina sympathizes with Linda. He reassures her, saying that everything is fine. She whispers to him a proposal to make a night exception. Lind blushes and opens his eyes wide. Then he blushes even more and opens his mouth in shock. Lily looks at Lind slyly and says that if that's the case, they need to clean the house together. The girl began to roll up the sleeves of her sweater. Lind misunderstands Bylina's hint. referring to her status as a holy virgin and suggesting that they wait until the hotel. Bylina and Lind look at Lily. The guy did not understand why she stood in a prayer pose. Then he heard her casting spells. The girl stood and cast a spell. At some point, the ground around her began to shake. Individual pieces of earth began to rise up. Lind covered himself with his hand and asked what was happening. He looked back in fear and saw that the ground was slipping away from under his feet. Kiryuk flew up. The guy ran forward and asked what it all meant. Huge stems burst from the ground and began to lift the stone slabs on which Lind and Bylina were located. The huge stems began to transform. As a result, they formed huge spikes and covered the entire squad. The stems begin to crumble and fall. A castle appears in place of the ruined house. Lind looks at the castle that has appeared, amazed. He asks how this is possible. Bylina looks up and sees the huge towers of the castle. Lind looks around and says it's just unbelievable. He asks if it's really a castle. Bylina puts her hands behind her head and laughs. She says that since the guy is a tamer, he should live in a mansion. Lily turns to the boy and says that she used her restoration magic. She hopes that the boy will like it. Lily laughs and says that Bylina is right, the master will go down in history. The guy asks if he can do it. Lily blushes and says that in the future they will have a huge number of group members, so they need a spacious and large headquarters. Malna blushes and hopes that other girls will join their group. Lind chuckles sheepishly and asks what the girl means by this. Bylina noticed a gill flying towards them. She says that he was most likely sleeping in the forest nearby. Lily thinks Gil has noticed the house appearing. Bylina waves her hand at Gil. The dragon notices the squad and flies up to them. Gil landed near the castle. The squad approached. Lily boasted about the bed for the dragon. Lind admired. Bylina offered to inspect the castle from the inside. The entire squad enters the castle. Lind looks around and is amazed by the high ceiling. Bylina slid down the banisters of the stairs and Lily and Lind walked up the steps. Looking around the large castle, Lind can hardly believe his eyes. Lily lists the available rooms, noting that furniture will appear later. Bylina leads everyone to the bedroom. The huge bedroom impressed Linda with its cleaning. Bylina playfully got used to it, suggesting to temporarily do without a housekeeper. The women appreciated the softness of the bed and settled down on it, noting that there was enough space for everyone. Lind was embarrassed. The guy puts his hand on Lily and laughs. Bylina asks the guy not to take off his clothes, and Lily, on the contrary, is hurried by Linda. Then Lind raises his head and notices another room. He asks what is in it. The girls say it's a bathroom. Bylina says the bathroom is made of glass so you can see everything. Bylina cuddles up to Lily and says it's all for show. Lily suggests Bylina show everything to the master. The girl takes off her clothes and leans against the glass on one side. Lily says that it embarrasses her a little. The guy blushes and opens his mouth wide in shock. Blood starts to flow from his nose. Bylina approaches Lily and lifts her up. She says that this is her opening service. Lily blushes and asks Bylina to stop. She asks Bylina not to embarrass her. Bylina says that Linda might like the view. Lily lowers her hand and turns her head away, blushing. She says that's not the point. At this point, Bylina asks Lind to look. Lily screams again. Lind looks at the girls with admiration and blushing. Bylina invites Lind to come to them. Lind quickly takes off his clothes and goes inside the bathroom. Lind immediately hugs Bylina and laughs. They are kissing. Lily at this time rises and cuddles up to Lind. The girls press themselves against Lind from both sides. The guy just stood there and made loud noises. Bylina said that she was very hot, and Lily continued to cuddle up to Lind and said that she wanted to be closer to the master. Bylina suggested that Lily change places. The guy blushed very deeply at that moment. Then Lind lets out a sharp cry as the girls switch places and move even closer to him. Lily looks up, smiles at Lind, and says she wants to ask him for one favor. The guy listens to the girl and fulfills her request. Lily fell to her knees and Lind stood behind her. The girl suddenly felt a sharp pain in her stomach and screamed. Lily covered her mouth with her hands and wondered why she made that strange sound. The girl screamed that she felt good. Lind leaned over and responded in kind, and Lily screamed loudly again. Lily started to crawl away from the guy, so Bylina immediately approached Lind. The girl kissed the guy. Lind tried to stop the girl. Bylina obeyed the guy and lay down on her back. She said that Lind could do whatever he wanted with her. The guy looks at the girl and blushes. Bylina says that the guy can stop worrying and relax. Lind listens to the girl and stands right in front of her. Bylina also starts making loud sounds. Then Bylina notices Lily next to her. She asks what the girl is going to do. Lily just smiles and licks her lips. Bylina asks Lily not to look at her. Lily then says that even a high-level S-rank adventurer can be weak in a certain place. Bylina claims that the same thing happens to Lily. Bylina starts screaming. The girl sees Lily in front of her and embraces her with her arms. Lily blushes and screams in surprise. Lily asks what Bylina is doing. She asks Bylina to stop, but the girl does not listen to her and continues, which causes Lily to scream again. As a result, Lily, Bylina and Lind begin to scream together. After some time, Lind goes to the shower. Bylina and Lily are with him. The guy tries to clean his body from dirt, but the girls say that their master can leave this work to them since it is their job. It was dawn in the castle. Snoring could be heard coming from the bedroom. Lind was lying on the bed with Bylina and Lily. Lind turns his head to the side and sees Lily. The guy immediately blushes and opens his eyes wide. The guy squints and thinks that he is very tired after the previous night. The girl continued to sleep. Lind points his finger at Lily's face and thinks about how innocent she looks in her sleep. Then the boy remembers the girl's indecent behavior last night. He blushes again and laughs. Then Lind turns his head to the other side and notices Bylina. He asks why Bylina sleeps in a strange position. The girl suddenly opens her mouth wide and approaches the guy. Lind asks the girl to stop. At breakfast, Bylina shares an egg she found in the forest, insisting on a hearty meal. Lily humorously comments on the replenishment of protein reserves. Lind enters the dining room with a saucer and a jug in his hands. He smiles and says that there was nothing but eggs, Hercules meat, and wild grass, so he was unable to cook something fancy. Lily suddenly rises from her chair and asks the guy to leave the cooking and serving to her. Lind insists that everything is fine. He says that he likes to cook. Reflecting on her friend's culinary skills, Lind barely has time to react to Bylina's menacing look and Lily's support. Lily sits back down at the table, wipes her mouth with a napkin, and closing her eyes confirms that they do need help. She says that they need cooks and butlers since they now live in a huge mansion. Bylina folds her hands behind her head, smiles, and says that without servants, their castle would not function as a base. Bylina stands up and holds out her hand, saying that they will rarely appear in the castle, so someone will have to stay there and maintain order. Lind agrees with the girl. Lily dreams of creating a beautiful garden for Linda. He, blushing, suggests hiring a gardener, suspecting manipulation. Bylina looks at Linda slyly and raises her index finger. She says that if the guy needs a landlord, she can help him find one. Lind is surprised and then asks what kind of strange person would come to such a remote place. Bylina smiles and says that it all depends on the payment. Bylina jumps on her chair and says that it is very interesting to talk about such things. Lind smiles and says that as soon as the Baron's case is decided, they will go further. The squad moves through the forest. Lind takes care of the girls. Bylina is cheerful. Lily emphasizes her high rank as an adventurer. Bylina teases Lily about her slow gait, which irritates her. Lind consoles the girls, promising them a quick relief on the way. Bylina removes the tree branch from her face and asks why they need to go out of their way and go around from the other side. Lind says that they have no attractive prey, nor will they meet other adventurers. He mentions that there were inexpensive medicinal herbs in that place. Bylina smiles and says that she understood everything. She claims that they are following Lind's safe plan. She thinks that this is a special survival technique. Lind closes his eyes and thanks the girl for the investigation. Bylina looks around and says that she still can't see anything. Lily asks what the girl expected. Wanting to let off steam with a fight, Bylina waves her fists. Lily jokingly warns that no one will risk facing her. Noticing movement in the bushes, Bylina tensed up, calling Lily over, both trying to determine the source of the disturbance. Lind saw a cave invisible to the others, assuming it was a magical camouflage activated by the Book of Stars or technology. Lind asks why then he is the only one who can see her. Lily suggests that it is because of resonance. Lind asks what resonance is. Lily replies that it is a matter of compatibility with the Book of Stars. She explains that the Book of Stars chooses the person who can read it. Having learned about the Book of Stars, the heroes find the entrance to the cave. Lily suggests continuing the journey, lighting the way with a torch. Lily's magic illuminated the room, startling Lind with its brightness. Bylina smelled something like an animal's lair. Lily approaches the girl and tells her that she doesn't always sniff in public. Then she chuckles. Bylina blushes. The girl's eyes widen and she says that Lily is right. She thinks she did something like that without really thinking about it. Lily asks if the girl really only behaves like that with people she trusts. Bylina covers her mouth with her hand and says that she is acting stupid. Finding mysterious writing on the wall, Lind asked Lily to translate it, but she noticed a dark stain stuck to the surface. The girl stretches out her hand and realizes that it is blood. Lind, dumbfounded, asks where the blood could have come from in this place. He exclaims, asking what is going on. Lily reads and says that the wall is written about the number of star books and their purposes per person. Lind exclaims and says that this is amazing information. Bylina is also happy. She raises her hands, clenches them into fists, and starts asking questions. Lily closes her eyes and then says that the most important part is hidden by the blood. She becomes more serious and says that she does not know. The girl suggests continuing their journey. The squad moves on. Lind says that they have come to that very room. The guy looks around and says that last time it wasn't so light in this room. He couldn't see everything then. Lind didn't know that there were so many sheets of paper in this room. The guy gets down and says that in any case they better pick it up and collect it. He starts collecting the sheets. Then the guy suggests collecting it all and analyzing it later. Having found a mass of ancient documents, the squad collects them, becoming especially interested in the girl's drawing. Lind turns sharply to the girls and says that he doesn't know for sure, but they might find sheets of paper with strange things, so he warns them and asks them to be careful. Bylina and Lily look at the guy in confusion. Returning to the castle in the evening, the squad lays out the sheets they found, assuming that they are parts of a book about the stars. It is decided to first study the contents. Lily will start making tea. Bylina quickly runs up to Linda and shows her cooking companion. She was holding an exploding fruit in her hands. Lind picks up one of the chairs and covers himself with it. Bylina laughs and says that the guy doesn't have to worry. She claims that the fruit is deactivated. Bylina winks and says the guy is right that these are just bad memories. She says Lind doubts her cooking skills. Then Bylina throws up the exploding fruit and starts cutting it with her hands. The pieces of fruit fall right onto the plate that is in front of Lind. Lind looks at the slices, dumbfounded. He says it's incredible. He claims the cut and thickness are perfect. Lily comes with tea and says that Bylina is very good at cutting. Bylina chuckles. Then Lily adds that it was not a compliment. Eating the fruit and reading the notes, Lind sheepishly reports that much is known, but he has found new training methods. Lind thinks that the information on the topic of knowing yourself is simply about human limitations. He asks if this is true. He also says that the pages say that it is necessary to try to take and tame various opponents. Lind turns to Bylina and asks if she and Lily want to read about it too. Bylina says that she and Lily can't read them. Lind asks why. He mentions that both girls should have a book about the stars. Lily smiles and says that Lind is right. Then she says that indeed Bylina has the first fighter's book and she has the healer's book, but they can't read each other's books. Bylina suggests checking this out. She takes out her first fighter book and hands it to the guy. Lind tries to read the book, but she can't make out the words. He is amazed. And then he says that he is not able to understand what is written in the book. Lily hypothesizes that the book is only understandable to its chosen readers, believing in the existence of truth beyond ordinary understanding. Lily says that the master's entrance into this cave is a destiny connected to the Book of Stars. Lind ponders the words about destiny. The sound of coals in the fireplace accompanies Lind's disappointment at the loss of many important pages. Bylina expresses doubt. Lind tells of signs in the cave that people had stayed there. Bylina stands up abruptly, her eyes wide, asking what that means. She claims she noticed nothing of the sort. Bylina says Lind is amazing, and the guy turns away and smiles. He assumes that such books have simply disappeared. Lily convinces Lind to take a rest, putting off thinking until after the quest. Lind anxiously asks if his friends will let him relax. Lily takes off her clothes and says it's true. At this time, a ship arrived in the royal capital. A man entered the room of the Royal Capital Guild headquarters. The man went inside and apologized. He reported that the investigation had been completed. Mr. Violento, who was the guild master, turned around. He took the report in his hands and began to read. Violento read that the chances of monsters appearing near the triangle west of the eastern forest are significantly lower. The man realized that there was a powerful spellcaster there. Violento thought about the commander of the Dragon Knights. The man is confident that the squad will figure it out on their own, noticing Lind's significant strengthening under the influence of the girls. Violento wanted Lind to come back stronger. He believed that the boy could become a tamer who would no longer fit into the S-rank category. Lily suggested that they figure out what they would need to do to complete the next quest. Lily reads the note that the jewel's delivery was delayed by the Ant Queen. She turns to Linda and says that his tamings will be tested at this very place. Linda asks if that's too much. Lily explains the danger of a group of monster ants. Lind is alarmed by the surrounding insects and doubts the possibility of taming them all at once. Lily says that if Lind fails, the ants will eat them at worst. Lind says that all this is happening only because Bylina destroyed the nest. Bylina laughs and apologizes for not being able to control herself. Having made up his mind, Lind boldly approaches the ants, extending his hand and trying to tame them. After being hit by an ant, Lind realized that taming the insect was difficult due to their collective consciousness. The boy heard the ant's request to ensure the safety of the group and not to touch the queen. Lind thought Bylina's blow had worked. The boy notices that the ant's hostility is disappearing. Bylina chuckles questioningly and cannot believe it. She asks how this is possible. Understanding the collective thinking of the ants, Lind suggested that they meet the queen and get the red ball. Later, an incredibly huge queen ant appeared right in front of the squad. The queen brought a red ball and handed it to Lind. Lind took the red ball and thanked the queen with a smile. The queen tilted her head to the side. Using cunning, Lind obtained a rare rainbow jewel from the queen ant, causing joy and pride among the troop. Bylina says that it was very hot in the desert with the fire ants. She was sweating. Then Bylina tells that there was an oasis nearby that saved her. She was able to take a good dip in the cold water in the spring. Bylina laughs and says that the fire ants can see them. Lily says they won't show themselves to them. Lily asks if it would be more exciting if someone were to watch them. The girls cuddle up to Lind. The guy asks the girls to stop and says that it embarrasses him. The girl presses herself closer to the guy, causing him to scream. Lily and Bylina smile at Linda. They say that it will be good for them if they stand even closer to each other. Lind turns very red and screams. A gale of wind hampers Lind's movement, surprised by the sudden change in conditions. Lily offers to check the task. She says that their request consists of delivering a stuffed ice wolf. The girl smiles. The guy looks at the girls and screams in indignation, because the girls were dressed very warmly and comfortably. Bylina says that they are dressed warmly because they are bystanders. She says that they are very cold when they are doing nothing. Lily agrees with the girl and says that the cold is not for women. Bylina raises her hand and says that if the boy moves a little, he can warm up. Lind chuckles anxiously. Lind pulls off his cloak and becomes more serious. He understands that this quest is a battle in special conditions. The boy thought about Gil, the dragon with the attribute of fire. He thinks that such power cannot be tolerated in cold weather. Then the boy turned his gaze to Kuryuk and noticed that he was completely frozen. The boy pronounces the name of the spirit and calls upon it. A strong energy envelops his body and Kajero appears behind him. Lind realizes that it is impossible to tame the creature without killing it, feeling Kajero's suffering from the cold. The appearance of a pack of ice wolves causes alarm. The wolves growled and bared their teeth. They sped up when they saw the party of adventurers. Lind wondered what would happen when his familiar weakened. He wondered how well he would fight with only 2 hands. Lind bravely engages the wolves but is struck. On Bylina's advice, he restrains the force of his blows to preserve the bodies for the stuffed animals. He lunges forward and continues to attack the wolves. The wolves don't have time to dodge, so they take all the blows. Bylina criticizes Lind's efforts, but Lily admires his work, emphasizing its perfection. Lily says that Lind's strength was weakened by the cold, but his Fire Emperor Wolf power was still enormous. She points out that at the moment, fully using the Fire Emperor Wolf's power is an unaffordable luxury. Lily continues and says that this is exactly what their master is doing. She states that he could have let it get out of control by using too much force. Lily smiles and says that if a person has understood how to use power, then a person can put more power into spiritual positions. The wolf's body falls right in front of Lind. The boy looks at the wolf and curses for not being able to keep its head intact. He braces himself for battle and throws away his 2 swords. Bylina looks at the boy in shock and shouts out that he threw away his 2 swords. At that moment, one of the wolves rushed forward to attack Lind. Lind screams that he has just started. The boy swung his hand and struck straight at the wolf's head. The wolf did not dodge and flew back. The monster was defeated. Lind approached the wolf and lifted its body. Bylina ran forward and began to scream with joy. She screamed that the boy was able to defeat the wolf without causing serious damage. She congratulated the boy on his victory. While praising Linda for controlling Kajero's power, Bylina and Lily notice a new wave of attacking monsters. Lily says that Lind now has the strength and weapons to fight the giant Hercules. The guy also had a large number of taming cards for the flame ants. The girl also mentioned Kajero's control and strength. Lily smiles and says admiringly that the master has become much stronger. She tries to support the guy and says that he will succeed. She thought that this was enough to fight the Baron. Lind straightens his cape and says that he is on the same level as the commander of the dragon troops. As Lind puts on his hood, Bylina says that he has no problem fighting at the moment. She states that their next goal is to fight the Baron. Suddenly, a strong wind blows, causing the boy to throw his head back. Covered with a cape, Lind accepts Lily's offer to warm up, eliciting smiles and humorous comments from Bylina about sharing warmth. In the evening, the entire detachment returned back to the castle. Lind was kissing Bylina, while Lily was pressing herself against him from behind. The guy puts his hand on the girl's back and she screams sharply. Lind continues kissing Bylina. Lily approaches Lind and tells him that he is lonely. The guy spent the whole night with the girls. Realizing the need for preparation, Lind focused on improving his physical fitness and began preparing for the battle with the Dragon Knights. A few hours later, the Baron appeared in the forest. He was thinking about the S-rank traveler with the dragon tamer and the sacred maiden who served the Pope. The man puts on his helmet and prepares his weapon. His servant says that there was some problem with the Pope, who was taken hostage. The man in armor offers to solve this problem. He says that the Pope and the Holy Virgin will make good souvenirs. Preparing for the decisive battle with the Baron, the detachment captured the Pope. The forest fell silent, awaiting the clash of the strongest adventurers. Balina shouts that the enemy is coming straight towards them. She claims that the enemy is very fast. Lily asks if the girl really noticed it too. Balina hums thoughtfully, then says she chose an open area to make it easier to fight. She guesses it's a bit cramped. Lin turns to Gil and asks him to step away from him for a few seconds. He says that they are fighting a famous dragon slayer. He says that this is not good for him. Gil makes a small noise. Lind smiles and gives him a thumbs up. He says everything is fine. He states that he could be treated harshly, so he suggested going home. Balina points her hand forward and says that their enemy is already very close. The boy looks forward and notices a bright flash. Lind's eyes widen as he realizes that a shock wave is being used against him. Lind turns to Kajero and shouts a command at him. A shield appears right in front of the guy, protecting him and the entire squad from attack. After the attack is over, Lind curses and asks what just happened. He says they were attacked suddenly and without a proper greeting. Lily approaches the master and says that the Baron is not the nicest person. She says that he often uses surprise attacks and witchcraft poisons to win. Lily also says that the Baron is not afraid to use dark magic. She was very serious. Lind smiles and says that the battle will be harder than he thought. Balina points to the Pope and says he is completely burned. And Lily says she forgot about him, so she will have to heal him. Lind turns to the side and notices a huge, powerful figure. The figure asks if the adventurers really called him. The Baron steps forward and stands right in front of Lind with an axe in his hands. He says that he just cleared the forest so that all the S-rank people can hear it. Lind looks at the Baron, who appeared dumbfounded. He tries to understand what kind of fighting spirit is coming from his black armor. It had a dark aura and incredible potential. The guy also noticed an axe, which he had heard about very often. He did not know whether he would be able to cope with such an opponent. Lind now understood the difference between rumors and a real meeting. But the boy was determined. He understood that he had to fight and win. The servant joined the Baron, who needed help. Seeing Lily, the Baron interrupted the conversation, greeting her. The Baron immediately recognizes the Holy Virgin. He falls silent for a moment. Then he puts down his axe and takes off his helmet. The Baron apologizes for his behavior and greets her. Lind looks at the Baron in shock and sees that under the helmet was a girl's face. He blushed and chuckled questioningly. The girl looked at Lind, which shocked him even more. Noticing the enemy's appearance, Lind rejects Balina's provocations, concentrating on confronting an experienced enemy, highly appreciating his fighting qualities. Loud explosions occur in the forest. The dragon slayer fought the dragon tamer. The Baron was breathing heavily. She swung her axe and was about to strike Lind. Lind also swung his sword and shouted along with Kajero. Lind's sword struck straight against Baron's axe. Balina and Lily tried to take shelter from the wind and dust that rose from the battle between Lind and Baron. Balina shouts in admiration at how Lind caught the Baron's huge axe so deftly. Lily folds her arms and says that the results of training with Kiryuk are noticeable. The Baron sighs and says that she thinks the boy is able to fight on par with her. She then knocks the boy's sword away and says that he still has a lot to learn to reach her level. Lind falls back and his sword breaks. He realizes that things are bad for him and now he may lose. The Baron swings his axe and screams that this is the end for the guy. Lind at this moment calls for help from Kajero. The Baron throws a punch but misses the boy as he jumps. The boy lands behind the Baron. Balina smiles and says that Lind was able to completely tame Kajero's power. Taking the criticism in stride, Balina and Lily confidently proclaim their master's strength, much to the Baron's displeasure. Outraged by the Baron's accusations, Lily and Balina decide to punish her later, while Lind, armed with a huge sword, prepares for a new attack. The Baron swings his axe and asks what is the point of changing his weapon. She punches the guy and tells him to know his place. Lind blocks the punch. But the Baron hits hard again, and it becomes difficult for the guy to withstand the blow. The Baron swings and laughs. She asks what happened. She thinks the guy can't do anything. The Baron throws a punch. Lind holds him back for a while, but then the girl pushes the guy away, causing him to fly off and fall on his back. The guy lifts up and sighs heavily. He looks at his sword and realizes that its blade has broken. Part of his sword falls right in front of the guy. Lind falls backwards onto his back. Baron approaches Lind and asks if he really thought he could stop her axe with his weapon. The Baron swings his axe and says that the guy is actually an inexperienced fool. She says that she will deal with him, leaving absolutely nothing of him. The Baron uses his magical powers. Lind realizes that this will be his end if he does not take action. The Baron strikes and screams at Lind that he will go to heaven. A bright flash occurs. Through the dust and fog, the Baron celebrated his victory over Lind, but soon her expression changed to one of amazement. Because she saw Lind unharmed, right in front of him, Kiryuk was hovering with a sword. The Baron curses at the familiar. She swings her axe and fires lightning balls at the spirit. She demands that the spirit disappear. Kiryuk dodges all the lightning balls, deflecting them with his sword. The Baron can't believe the spirit is playing a trick on her. She dodges her own lightning balls. The girl tries to recover from the attack. She tenses up and can't believe that a small spirit has so much power. Lind appears and apologizes. He says that he used the tamer fighting style. The guy smiles contentedly and says that his familiars are quite strong. The Baron sighs and asks if Lind really calls himself a dragon tamer. She asks if the guy knows that she is called the Dragon Slayer. Lind wonders if it is just a name. The Baron smiles and says that's not all. She says that she is quite a strong opponent. The girl begins to be enveloped in flames. She smiles and says that she will show her strength. The girl raises her axe and shouts that she will show the true strength of the Baron. The earth rises around her. The guy looks at the wave of attacks that is moving towards him. He feels that some kind of cold is passing through his whole body. Lind finally understands what kind of dark magic Lily was talking about. Right in front of the guy, a huge monster appears, stretching its paws and mouth towards him. Lind tries to get another weapon from his magic bag. He says that power will fight against power. He is sure that he will reach the limit of fire power. Lind takes out the hilt of the sword as it called to him. He could not master this thing until now. But now Lind's power has increased, so he will be able to use it. Lind summons Kajero, then points the hilt at Baron and unleashes a powerful attack. He shouts that this is his secret technique. The Baron swings his axe and screams. Lind jumps up and tries to strike. The fighters collide and another powerful explosion occurs. Bylina's eyes widen and her mouth drops open. Bylina shouts at Lily that they need to follow them. Lily covers her head with her hand at that moment. The Pope is still hanging from the tree at this time. He is hit by a powerful wave that spread throughout the forest after Lind and Baron collided. The servant had been hiding behind a tree the entire time. Bylina shouts at Lind to look up. Lind hums questioningly and lifts his head. He notices something sparkling in the sky. Baron screams that this is the end of the guy. She swings and sends more attacks in his direction. Lind commands Kiryuk. Kiryuk obeys and flies up. He repels all attacks with his sword. The Baron becomes angry because of Kiryuk's appearance. Then she sees that she is about to be attacked. The girl does not have time to dodge. Kiryuk attacks the girl again. The Baron's eyes widen in surprise. The girl covers herself with her hands. Lind's attack destroyed the Baron's armor's protective capabilities, causing pain and disorientation, leaving her confused. The armor on the girl's body begins to tear into pieces. Lind looks at the girl in shock, not understanding what is happening. He saw parts of her body without clothes. The Baron slammed her hand on the ground. Then she turned around, looked angrily at the guy and began to speak negatively about him. The Baron covers herself with her hands and demands that no one look at her, as she is embarrassed. Lily blushes and says that this is exactly what she expected from the master. Bylina smiles and supports the master. Lind smiles anxiously and says it's just a coincidence. Bylina approaches the guy, smiles slyly and asks him not to talk like that. She asks if the guy likes the girl. She thinks the Baron is his type. Bylina points out the triumph in the girl's eyes. Her plump lips, her tan skin, which in her opinion attracts Linda's attention. Lily points out that their master's body reacts quickly, even though he has Bylina and Lily. Lind blushes very deeply and says that this is not true. The Baron points his hand at the squad and demands that they be quiet. She asks how they dare mock her. She says that she will not forgive such behavior. The Baron insists that their fight is not over yet. She demands that the dragon tamer come to her and fight. Bylina smiles and asks if the girl really doesn't care that she is naked in public. The Baron blushes even more from embarrassment. With his arms clutched to his body, Baron is confronted with Bylina's snarky comments about possibly performing without armor. The Baron clenched her jaw very hard. Beads of sweat rolled down her body. The girl grabbed her axe sharply. Everyone thought that the girl was going to continue their fight. But instead of raising the axe and attacking, the girl dropped down right in front of her. Lind was scared because he thought the girl was going to attack him. The girl fell to her knees and lowered her head. The Baron hugged herself with both arms and began to cry. The situation was humiliating for her. She said that she could not bear it. The girl began to repeat this phrase. Lind smiles and approaches the girl. He asks why the girl is upset. He asks her not to be so serious. Lind extends his hand to the girl and says that it is just a coincidence that the armor shattered into pieces. While convincing Baron that the armor's destruction was an accident, Lind becomes unnerved by her determination to admit defeat and her unexpected attempt at counterattack. The Baron's attack is stopped by an unknown girl who saves Lind from the blow. The shocked hero carefully backs away, amazed by the miraculous rescue. Beads of sweat began to flow down her face again due to excitement. Balina stepped right on the girl's hand. Balina looked at the Baron with a smile, folding her arms across her chest. Balina turns to Lind and says that he has let his protector down. She explains to him that he cannot behave like this all the time. Lind looks at the girl in bewilderment. Confirming Lily's words about the Baron's lack of principles, Balina smiles. Lind embarrassedly makes excuses and tugging at his hair. Balina thinks that a little later she will have to punish her master for his carelessness. She wonders what to do with the Baron who was lying under her foot. The Baron was still lying on the ground, cursing. She demanded that they finish her off and not torture her.